I spent 3 years in prison. 3 years ago, I was the young master of the Yi family in Dragon City. I had everything: money, power, respect. Then one night, mysterious enemies wiped out my entire family. I barely survived, but I ended up behind bars. In prison, when I had lost all hope, I met 5 old masters. They looked like dirty, strange old men, but they were secretly the most powerful people in the world. They taught me everything they knew. One gave me a ring that commands hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Another gave me control over a network of agents across the country. The third passed down magical healing needles that can control life and death. The fourth handed me a black gold card holding 1/3 of the world's wealth. And the fifth? He built an entire corporation in Dragon City for me, the Tianjun Group, just because he was bored. Before I left, I knelt down and knocked my head on the ground 5 times to thank them. I promised I would come back for them. When I finally walked out of prison, the sky was blue and the air tasted like freedom. Then a BMW screeched to a stop in front of me. My fiancée, Li Yaqing, stepped out. For a moment, my heart felt warm. I thought she came to welcome me home. I was wrong. She threw our marriage contract at me and ripped her copy to pieces right in front of my face. Paper floated everywhere like snow. She told me we were done. She said I was nothing now, just an ex-convict with no family and no money. She even tossed $1,000,000 at me, calling it charity so I wouldn't embarrass her by begging on the streets. I stayed calm. I told her to keep her money for her next wedding. That made her angry, but I didn't care. Years ago, her family was nothing. It was my Yi family that helped them rise. Now she dared to kick me when I was down. She drove off in a rage. I crushed the marriage contract into dust with my bare hand and let it blow away in the wind. A moment later, another car pulled up. A middle-aged man in a suit stepped out and bowed to me. His name was Zhao Fu, the manager of the Tianjun Group, the most powerful company in Dragon City. And he was bowing to me. I told him to keep running the company for now and to keep my identity secret. More importantly, I ordered him to investigate who destroyed my family 3 years ago. Then I asked him to take me to see my godmother, Chinsini. She was my mother's closest friend and the one person who fought to protect me after everything fell apart. I owed her a visit. On the way, Zhao Fu offered me some rare black mountain tea as a gift for her. Good thinking. I almost forgot to bring something. We arrived at her neighborhood, a high-end residential area called Jinyuan Shijia. But the moment I stepped out of the car, I sensed something hidden beneath the buildings, a yuan yang earth vein, a source of pure energy. My body was still damaged from the attack 3 years ago, and this energy was exactly what I needed to heal. I smiled. It seemed fate still connected me to my godmother. Meanwhile, upstairs in her apartment, my godmother was yelling at her husband, Sun Zhonghai, to go pick me up from prison. He was lazily drinking tea, in no rush at all. She told him I was more important to her than a biological son, and if he dared show me a bad attitude, she would make him regret it. He grabbed his car keys and headed out, but I was already on my way up. I rang the doorbell, and my godfather's son Zhonghai opened the door. He stared at me for a moment. He barely recognized me. I had changed a lot in 3 years. Then my godmother rushed over and pulled me into a tight hug. Her eyes filled with tears. She kept saying how worried she had been, how glad she was that I was back. I felt truly moved. Besides my dead family, she was the only person in this world who really cared about me. My godfather was less enthusiastic. He shrugged and tossed his car keys aside, muttering that at least he didn't have to go pick me up now. My godmother fussed over me, saying I had gotten darker and thinner, but also stronger. My godfather couldn't help making a snide comment about prison life being rough. My godmother shut him up fast and told him to go get Mu Qing, their daughter, my godsister. A girl in a dress walked out of her room, still half asleep. She had grown up a lot since I last saw her. When she realized who I was, she just froze for a few seconds and then gave me a cold. Oh, when she was little, she used to follow me everywhere. But now, knowing I had been in prison, she clearly wanted nothing to do with me. I brought them the rare black mountain tea as a gift. But my godfather took one look at the dark leaves and turned sour. Mu Qing wrinkled her nose and said it looked like moldy garbage. They had no idea they were holding one of the rarest teas in the world. My godmother stepped in and said it was the thought that counted. Then my godmother dropped the big news. She had already prepared a room for me. I would be living with them. My godfather and Mu Qing both freaked out. He complained she didn't ask them first. Mu Qing flat out refused to live with an outsider. But my godmother shut them both down. She said I was family, this was my home, and if they had a problem, she would move out with me. That ended the argument fast. My godfather tried a different approach, offering to let me stay in one of his other empty apartments. But I smiled and said I'd rather stay here. The truth was, I had sensed the yuan-yang energy vein under this building. I needed it to heal the hidden damage still inside my body. So there was no way I was leaving. My godmother happily announced she would cook a family reunion dinner. But Mu Qing came out of her room dressed up in a pretty yellow floral dress, saying she had plans to eat at a club with her friend Qianqian. My godfather backed her up, mentioning that some rich guy named Chun Sanyuan would be there and that networking was more important than eating with, his words, irrelevant people. My godmother ignored his jab. Instead, her eyes lit up. She told Mu Qing to take me along. Mu Qing looked like she wanted to cry, but she didn't dare argue with her mother, who ruled the household. So she dragged me out the door and into her red Audi. She drove with a terrible mood, probably wishing she could dump me on the side of the road. Before we arrived, she turned and glared at me. She warned me not to take advantage of her mother's protection and not to have any designs on their family. I just shrugged. My little godsister had a lot of misunderstandings about me. But that was fine. Time would show her the truth. Soon we pulled up in front of a club. Mu Qing told me to keep quiet and just follow her inside the club. Her friend Su Qianqian came running over to greet her, then spotted me and immediately assumed I was Mu Qing's boyfriend. Mu Qing's face turned red and she quickly denied it. She dragged Qianqian off to the restroom, telling me to just grab some food on my own. I actually knew Qianqian from before, but since Mu Qing clearly didn't want me talking to anyone, I kept my mouth shut. The club was fancy, expensive decorations, top quality everything. The people inside were all dressed up and wealthy. They gave me strange looks, but I didn't care. I was hungry, so I grabbed a plate from the buffet and started eating. Meanwhile, in the restroom, Qianqian recognized my name and was surprised I was out of prison. She even felt bad for not greeting me properly. But Mu Qing complained about the whole situation, how her mom forced me to live with them, how I had nothing now, how I might have changed after 3 years in prison. The two of them came up with a plan. Let me experience the gap between myself and the rich people here, so I would know my place and leave on my own. They also mentioned some guy called Young Master Yin who had been chasing Mu Qing and figured he would put me down if he saw me near her. While they were scheming, someone called my name from behind. I turned around and my face went dark. It was Li Yaqing, my ex-fiancée, the same woman who had torn up our marriage contract just hours ago outside the prison. What terrible luck. She was all dolled up and looked stunning, but her attitude was as ugly as ever. She sneered and asked what a convict like me was doing in a place like this. The guy next to her, with his arm around her waist, laughed and said I must have followed her here like a stalker. His name was Zhang Tao. He used to be one of my lackeys back when I was the young master. Now he had gotten lucky in business and climbed his way into high society. He was enjoying every second of looking down on me. Li Yaqing put on a disgusted face and told me to stop dreaming about getting her back. Zhang Tao bragged about stealing my fiancée, trying to provoke me. So I hit back. I said picking up someone else's used shoes wasn't something to brag about, and asked if he was really that desperate for women. Li Yaqing nearly exploded. She insisted we never actually got married, so it didn't count. Then I casually mentioned a birthmark on her left side that only someone intimate would know about. Zhang Tao's face turned green. She had told him she had never been touched before. Li Yaqing panicked and started making excuses. Zhang Tao, humiliated, cursed at me and called for people to throw me out. I wasn't worried. These two were nothing but clowns. I was ready to teach them a lesson. But then Mu Qing and Qianqian walked out of the restroom. Both of them were daughters of top-tier families, beautiful and powerful. Nobody in this room would dare mess with them. Li Yaqing and Zhang Tao instantly changed their faces when they saw them. Li Yaqing nervously asked if these two were with me. She was scared that maybe I actually had powerful connections. But Mu Qing, cold as ice, said she barely knew me. She said I was just tagging along. Li Yaqing relaxed immediately. It confirmed what she already believed, that once I lost my status, nobody would stand by me. No matter how close we once were, none of it mattered compared to money and power. I didn't understand why Mu Qing pretended she barely knew me, but I didn't care. Whatever made her happy. Li Yaqing jumped at the chance to get friendly with Mu Qing and Qian Qian. She even invited them to her wedding with Zhang Tao in 2 days. Then, just to twist the knife, she casually said I could come too. I ignored her completely. Mu Qing actually felt a flicker of pity for me. She thought I had lost all my fight after 3 years in prison. She almost spoke up for me, but held back. Instead, she accepted the wedding invitation and even said she might bring me along. Zhang Tao laughed and said bringing me would be embarrassing. Li Yaqing piled on, saying she was just joking. She didn't want a convict at her wedding. These two really couldn't stop poking at me. Before I could respond, the room suddenly buzzed with excitement. A tall, thin young man in a suit walked in like a prince. His name was Yin Tianqi. He made a beeline for Mu Qing, flashing his best smile. He was clearly one of her pursuers. Then he heard about me, the guy who came with Mu Qing. Qian Qian helpfully introduced me as the former young master of the Yi family, and made sure to mention how close Mu Qing and I used to be. She was stirring up trouble on purpose. It worked. Yin Tianqi looked at me with hostile eyes and made a joke about whether the club food was better than prison food. Everyone laughed, so I slapped him across the face. The laughter died instantly. The whole room went silent. Everyone stared in shock. Yin Tianqi held his cheek, barely believing what just happened. I told him coldly that if he barked at me again, I would cripple him. I had already been holding back with Zhang Tao and Li Yaqing. And this Yin Tianqi, the way he looked at Mu Qing disgusted me. So I let my hand do the talking. One slap to shut them all up. Zhang Tao screamed that I was insane for hitting young Master Yin. Li Yaqing gleefully said I was finished. Yin Tianqi, shaking with rage, demanded I kneel and apologize. He called over a dozen bodyguards who surrounded me. I almost laughed. A dozen bodyguards? They couldn't stop one of my fingers. Mu Qing panicked. Not because she cared about me, but because if I got seriously hurt, she couldn't explain it to her mother. Qian Qian told her to let me take a beating first. They could step in if things got really bad. Mu Qing reluctantly agreed. Yin Tianqi told me to kneel and beg forgiveness. I looked at him and said he wasn't worth it. Just as he was about to order the attack, a commanding voice cut through the room. A man in his 30s walked in, sharp suit, powerful presence. The entire club shifted its attention to him. People called him Mr. Chun. Yin Tianqi's attitude flipped in a heartbeat. He ran over like a puppy, calling him Brother Chun and pointing at me, complaining that I had hit him. He begged this Mr. Chun to deal with me. Mr. Chun glanced my way. When he heard my name, something flickered in his eyes for just a second. Then he calmly said I was just a grasshopper living in the past, and told Yin Tianqi to throw me out and cripple me. Simple as that. Yin Tianqi grinned and ordered his men to grab me. Mu Qing's face went pale. A beating was one thing, but being crippled was serious trouble. She was about to step forward and beg for mercy. But before she could, I spoke up. I looked straight at this so-called Mr. Chun and said, "Who do you think you are, giving orders about me?" The whole room went dead silent after I spoke. Everyone stared at me like I was crazy. First I slapped Yin Tianqi, and now I was talking back to the great Mr. Chun. Chen Sanyuan laughed, not a friendly laugh, but the kind a powerful man gives when he can't believe someone so small dares challenge him. He told everyone to remind me who he was. Yin Tianqi screamed that Chen Sanyuan had risen to the absolute top of Dragon City's elite, and nobody had ever dared speak to him like that. Zhang Tao added that even when I was still the Yi family's young master, I would have had to bow to this man. Li Yaqing chimed in too, bragging that Chen Sanyuan was about to sign a deal with the Tianjun Group, which would make him one of the most powerful people in the city. The Tianjun Group? I almost laughed. That was my company. Mu Qing and Qian Qian were panicking. They were worried that being associated with me would drag their families into trouble. Mu Qing couldn't understand me. I had stayed quiet when Zhang Tao and Li Yaqing insulted me, but now I was picking fights with the most powerful people in the room. Mu Qing stepped forward and apologized to Chen Sanyuan on my behalf, saying I had just gotten out of prison and wasn't thinking straight. Qian Qian backed her up, asking him to show mercy. Chen Sanyuan's eyes lingered on them in a way I didn't like. He smiled and invited them upstairs to his private room for drinks. That was when I stepped in. I blocked their path and said he wasn't worthy of drinking with my sister. The room nearly had a heart attack. Mu Qing and Qian Qian screamed at me to shut up, but I ignored them. I looked at Chen Sanyuan and told him that since he apparently had a partnership deal with the Tianjun Group, I was now informing him that the deal was canceled. The Tianjin Group would never work with him. Yin Tianqi laughed and asked who I thought I was, as if the Tianjin Group belonged to me. So I said, "What if it does?" That set off a storm of mockery. Yin Tianqi listed off how massive the Tianjin Group was. Hundreds of billions in assets, hundreds of subsidiary companies, operations in over 100 countries. The idea that a convict owned it was the funniest thing they had ever heard. Zhang Tao and Li Yaqing piled on, saying I must have gone insane in prison. Even Mu Qing yelled at me to stop embarrassing myself. Qianqian shook her head, convinced I had lost my mind. Chen Sanyuan laughed too, but then his eyes turned cold. He reminded Mu Qing and Qianqian that he had already given them face once. The message was clear. He wouldn't be so generous a second time. The two girls went pale. They had no idea how to fix this. I shook my head. Nobody believed the truth. Fine. I told Chen Sanyuan plainly. I was being kind by just canceling the deal. If he kept pushing me, I would make his entire family disappear from Dragon City. The room exploded. Everyone thought I had completely lost my mind. Yin Tianqi and Li Yaqing kept repeating that I was a dead man. Mu Qing looked like she might faint. Chen Sanyuan laughed one last time and said he wanted to see if I could even walk out of this building. He snapped his fingers, and a wall of bodyguards blocked every exit. The killing intent in the room was suffocating. Mu Qing's mind went blank. She truly believed I was finished. Then, from outside the blocked door, a sharp voice rang out, ordering the bodyguards to move aside. Chen Sunyuan's face changed. Everyone turned to look, wondering who on earth would dare to challenge him on his own turf. Most people assumed it was some unlucky rich kid who didn't know what was happening inside and was about to walk into a disaster. But I had a feeling things were about to get interesting. The click of high heels echoed through the room, and a cold, beautiful woman in a sharp outfit walked in, followed by 7 or 8 bodyguards in black. It was Zhao Yu, the general manager of the Tianjin Group. My employee. Chen Sunyuan's face did a complete flip. 1 second ago, he was ready to crush me. Now he was smiling and bowing, rushing over to greet her like she was royalty. The whole room buzzed with shock. Nobody expected a business giant from the Tianjin Group to show up at a casual club event. Mu Qing and Qianqian saw their chance. They tried to pull me away while everyone was distracted, telling Chen Sanyuan not to worry about nobody like me. But Yin Tianqi wouldn't let it go. He cleverly tied things to the Tianjin Group, saying that since Chen Sanyuan was about to partner with them, my disrespect toward him was the same as disrespecting the Tianjin Group itself. Zhang Tao and Li Yaqing piled on, telling me to get on my knees and apologize to both Chen Sanyuan and Zhao Yu. I looked at Zhao Yu and said calmly, "If I kneel, can you handle it?" Zhao Yu's heart nearly stopped. She knew exactly who I was, her boss, the real owner of the Tianjin Group. There was no universe where she would let me kneel. But before she could react, Chen Sanyuan screamed at me for disrespecting her too. Mu Qing and Qianqian were on the edge of tears, begging me to apologize. Zhang Tao and Li Yaqing were practically dancing with joy, thrilled to watch me dig my own grave. Yin Tianqi ordered the bodyguards to grab me. Then Zhao Yu's voice cut through the chaos like a blade of ice. "I dare anyone to touch him." The entire room froze. Yin Tianqi stammered in confusion. Why was she protecting me? Zhao Yu shut him down with a single glare, asking who he thought he was to even speak to her. Then she walked up to me, bowed respectfully, and said, "Young Master Yi, I'm sorry you were troubled." The room went completely silent. Every jaw dropped. I kept my hands behind my back and said coolly that this little scene wasn't enough to scare me. But I added that the Tianjin Group needed to do a better job choosing its business partners. Zhao Yu understood immediately. She turned to Chen Sanyuan and told him their cooperation needed to be reconsidered. Chen Sanyuan panicked. He begged her not to cancel the deal over a convict. She was about to reveal my real identity, but I coughed to stop her. She was sharp. She caught my signal instantly. Instead, she said I was her brother's life-saving benefactor, which made me her benefactor too. His words carried weight with her. Chen Sanyuan and Yin Tianqi tried to argue that a man fresh out of prison couldn't possibly have saved anyone. Zhao Yu's eyes turned to ice. She asked Chen Sanyuan if this was how his people treated her family's savior. That did it. Chen Sunyuan's whole body trembled. Offending the Tianjin Group's general manager meant the end of everything. Not just the deal, but his entire family's future in Dragon City. He turned on Yin Tianqi instantly. He blamed everything on him, said he had been deceived by his lies, and announced that all business between the Qin family and the Yin family was permanently cancelled. Then he ordered his bodyguards to throw Yin Tianqi out. Yin Tianqi's world collapsed. His family's position in Dragon City depended on their partnership with Qin Sanyuan. Losing it was like cutting off half their lifeline. He begged and groveled, but nobody helped him. He was dragged out of the club like a stray dog. Zhang Tao and Li Yaqing saw the tide turning and quietly slipped away before the trouble could splash onto them. Outside the club, Yin Tianqi stared at the building with hatred burning in his eyes. He blamed me and Mu Qing for everything. He pulled out his phone and made a call, telling someone named Old Zhou to arrange some men. He wasn't done with us. Not by a long shot. Back inside the club, Qin Sanyuan rubbed his hands together nervously and asked if Zhao Yu and I were satisfied with how he handled things. Zhao Yu looked at me first. I shrugged and said it wasn't a big deal, as long as the lesson was learned. She told Qin Sanyuan the matter was settled, but warned him to choose his friends more carefully in the future, or next time it wouldn't just be a lost deal. Qin Sanyuan understood perfectly. The partnership with the Tianjun group was gone, but at least his family survived. He nodded and promised to be smarter. With everything calmed down, I didn't feel like staying. I took Mu Qing and Qianqian and left the club. They were both still shaken up. Once we reached the underground parking garage, the two of them started scolding me. Mu Qing told me to stop being so reckless and to think before I spoke. Qianqian said if Zhao Yu hadn't shown up, Qin Sanyuan would have killed me. She kept telling me that Zhao Yu's power wasn't mine, and I needed to know my place. I told them calmly that I wasn't being reckless. Those people simply couldn't touch me. But they didn't believe a word of it and kept nagging. Then footsteps echoed from the elevator. A crowd of men poured out and surrounded us. Behind them, Yin Tianqi stepped forward in a white suit, eyes full of dark fury. He smiled coldly and said he didn't expect to see me again so soon. I put my hands behind my back and smiled. I asked if the lesson from earlier wasn't enough and if he wanted another one. That made him angrier. He said without Zhao Yu here, nobody could protect me now. He had already lost his partnership with Qin Sanyuan because of me, so he had nothing left to fear. Then he turned to Mu Qing, and what he said made my blood run cold. He said he had chased her for years, and she had never given him a straight answer. He threatened that if he cooked the raw rice, forced himself on her, she wouldn't have a choice anymore. Mu Qing's face went white. She warned him that her family was still powerful enough to cause him trouble. Qianqian tried a different approach, offering a business deal between her family and his to replace what he lost with Qin Sanyuan. But Yin Tianqi was beyond reasoning. He had been humiliated in public and lost a major ally. He wanted revenge and nothing else. He told me that if I knelt down, knocked my head on the ground 3 times, and broke my own arm, he might consider letting me live. Mu Qing and Qianqian begged me to just swallow my pride and bow my head to stay safe. They were terrified I would say something that would make everything worse. Of course, that's exactly what I did. I looked around at his gang of thugs and said, "With this trash you brought, you think you can take my arm? Pathetic." Yin Tianqi's veins bulged on his neck. He screamed at his men to kill me. They pulled out metal bars and closed in, step by step. Mu Qing was panicking. If anything happened to me, she would never be able to face her mother again. Mu Qing did something that genuinely touched me. She gritted her teeth and told Yin Tianqi that if he let me go, she would be his girlfriend. She was willing to sacrifice herself to save me. I felt warmth in my heart. I hadn't expected her to go that far for me. I told her not to worry. These guys weren't even enough for a warm-up. She and Qianqian got even more frustrated. They thought I was talking nonsense. One person against over 20 armed thugs? They thought I had lost my mind. Mu Qing repeated her offer to Yin Tianqi, desperate to end this peacefully. But he just laughed in her face. He told her she was overestimating her own value. Once he finished with me, she wouldn't be going anywhere either. Mu Qing's blood ran cold. She finally understood. To him, she was already a trapped animal. She had no bargaining power at all. I narrowed my eyes. I told Yin Tianqi that I had been willing to let things end at the club. But since he insisted on coming back for more, he only had himself to blame. He laughed and ordered his men to attack. They charged at me with iron bars, screaming insults about convicts and trash. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I moved like a ghost. I flashed between them, fists landing with bone-cracking force. Bodies flew through the air like paper. In the blink of an eye, every single one of them was on the ground, groaning in pain. Not one was left standing. Yin Tianqi's eyes nearly popped out of his skull. Mu Qing and Qianqian stood frozen, mouths wide open. None of them could believe what they had just seen. One man destroying over 20 fighters in seconds. I cracked my knuckles and walked toward Yin Tianqi. He stumbled backward, legs shaking, face white as a sheet. I grabbed his wrist and squeezed. His bone snapped with a clean crack. He screamed and cried, calling me a madman. He threatened me with his family. He was the only son of the Yin family, the heir to their empire. I didn't care. He still hadn't learned his lesson. I kicked his kneecap. Another snap. He nearly passed out from the pain, collapsing into a sobbing mess, begging me to stop. Mu Qing and Qianqian rushed over and told me it was enough. They were worried about the consequences of crippling the Yin family's heir. For their sake, I stopped. I leaned down and told Yin Tianqi that today I was being merciful. But if he ever went after Mu Qing or her family, I would erase the Yin family from Dragon City entirely. I left him crying on the ground and drove away with the girls. Half an hour later, we were back at the apartment. The moment we walked in, my godmother rushed over and asked if I had fun at the club. She only had eyes for me, which clearly annoyed Mu Qing. Mu Qing snapped and said I had spent the whole night showing off and nearly got her and Qianqian killed. My godfather jumped up from the couch immediately, demanding to know what kind of trouble I had caused. Mu Qing told everyone the whole story of what happened at the club. My godfather's face darkened immediately. He made it clear he blamed me, saying I had no self-control after 3 years in prison and never thought about consequences. Now the Yin family might come looking for trouble. My godmother wasn't having it. She snapped back that Yin Tianqi had started everything, and if it weren't for me, their daughter would have been violated by that animal. She said breaking his bones was exactly what he deserved. My godfather stormed off to the bedroom with his tea, too annoyed to watch my godmother defend me. Mu Qing argued too. She said I could have just apologized and kept a low profile instead of making things worse with my big mouth. My godmother sighed and told her something that changed her tune completely. She said Yin Tianqi wasn't really after me. He was after Mu Qing. Sooner or later, he would have tried to force himself on her. What I did tonight put fear into him and might have saved Mu Qing from a terrible fate. Mu Qing went quiet. She remembered how Yin Tianqi had threatened her in the parking garage and realized her mother was right. She shuddered at what could have been, but she was too proud to admit she was wrong. So she just mumbled that she would buy me some clothes tomorrow and ran off to bed. My godmother apologized for her behavior. I told her not to worry. Mu Qing had actually tried to help me several times tonight, even offering to date Yin Tianqi to protect me. Deep down, she still cared. Then my godmother got serious. She asked me how I really knew Zhao Yu from the Tianjun group. She pointed out that the Tianjun group only appeared in the last 2 years, while I had been locked up for 3. So when could I possibly have saved Zhao Yu's brother? She was too smart to fool easily. I quickly made up a story. Zhao Yu's brother had been my cellmate. I looked after him in prison, and now his sister was returning the favor. It was a lie, but I had no choice. The people who destroyed my family were still out there, and their power was terrifying. I couldn't drag my godmother into that danger by revealing that I owned the Tianjun group. She bought it and told me to get some rest. Once I was alone, Zhao Yu called with news. After my family was wiped out, 3 families, Lu, Li, and Lin, had swooped in and divided up all of the Yi family's businesses. Those stolen assets had helped them climb to second-tier status in Dragon City. She asked if I wanted the Tianjun group to move against them. I told her not yet. I had my own plans. Let them enjoy themselves a little longer. I hung up and sat cross-legged on the bed. My body still carried damage from the attack 3 years ago. I had learned incredible skills from my 5 masters, but this hidden injury was holding me back. My martial arts cultivation was stuck at the peak of the Kaiyuan stage, unable to break through to the Qidong level. In the ancient martial arts path, there were 8 known realms, from Tsuedi all the way up to Rushing. But beyond those were 8 divine realms that the world didn't know about, reaching all the way to Kaitian. And that was the path I was walking. The Yuan-Yang energy vein beneath this building was exactly what I needed. I spent the whole night absorbing its energy, and by morning I felt refreshed and stronger. The damage inside my body had noticeably weakened. My godmother knocked on my door. She told me with a smile that Mu Qing had woken up early and made breakfast for everyone, her way of apologizing without actually saying sorry. I sat down at the table and was surprised. It wasn't just simple porridge. There were crystal shrimp dumplings and tasty side dishes. The dumplings were incredible, juicy, bursting with flavor. Mu Qing beamed with pride and bragged that she had traveled to Guangzhou to study dumpling making for 2 weeks. My godfather joked that she should focus on learning business like her friend Qianqian instead of cooking, but she just stuck out her tongue playfully. After breakfast, Mu Qing looked at my clothes and said they were ugly. She told me she was taking me to the mall to buy new ones. I felt a warmth in my chest. She was finally reaching out to me on her own. We drove to a big shopping mall nearby. The parking lot was full, so Mu Qing dropped me off and told me to wait for her at the LV store on the second floor while she parked. I walked in and immediately spotted a familiar face. Of course, just my luck. Right at the LV entrance, I ran into Li Yaqing and Zhang Tao again. That woman just wouldn't leave me alone. She sneered about seeing a convict in a luxury store and even pulled out a stack of small bills, trying to, charitably, hand them to me in front of everyone. Zhang Tao laughed and told me a single item here cost more than I could eat in a year. I wasn't in the mood for their games. I pulled out 1,000 yuan in cash and slapped it across Li Yaqing's face. I said it was my wedding gift for the happy couple. After all, Zhang Tao used to be my errand boy, and now he was marrying my leftovers. I said it loud enough for the entire floor to hear. Everyone turned to stare. Li Yaqing's face burned red. She screamed at Zhang Tao to hit me. He raised his fist. Then Mu Qing showed up just in time. Zhang Tao stopped. He didn't know it, but Mu Qing had just saved him from becoming a cripple. If he had actually swung at me, I wouldn't have held back. Li Yaqing switched to her fake friendly act, grabbing Mu Qing's hand and playing victim. Mu Qing shook her off and said she was here to buy me clothes. Li Yaqing instantly figured it out. I wasn't spending my own money. She smirked and walked into the store with Zhang Tao. Mu Qing scolded me again for being too loud and too proud. She asked if I could please keep a low profile. I smiled and asked if there was actually anyone in Dragon City I couldn't handle. She stared at me like I was insane and told me to stop talking nonsense. She picked out 3 outfits for me, spending nearly 100,000 yuan without blinking. Meanwhile, Li Yaqing and Zhang Tao had VIP service across the store. On their way out, Li Yaqing couldn't resist one last jab, asking if I planned to rely on women my whole life. That's when a store manager came running over, looking flustered. He bowed deeply and handed me a VIP card with 1,000,000 yuan loaded on it, saying it was from the mall's boss, Mr. Qing. He told me to spend freely anytime. Li Yaqing's face went blank. Zhang Tao looked like someone had hit him with a brick. Mu Qing's mouth fell open. I took the card calmly and thanked the manager. The truth was simple. This was the biggest mall in Dragon City, and it belonged to the Tianjun Group. My company. The whole building was mine. But nobody knew that. I glanced at Li Yaqing with a small, cold smile. She looked like she had been struck by lightning. We left the mall, and Mu Qing got a call from Qianqian inviting her to a college reunion dinner tonight at the Dragon City Grand Hotel. Qianqian teased her about some guy named Chen Zifeng, apparently an old flame. Mu Qing got flustered and denied everything. She didn't want to bring me. She was terrified I would cause another scene. But Qianqian talked her into going, and since her mother's rule was clear, wherever she went, I went. She had no choice. She turned to me with a stern look and laid down the law. From now on, wherever we went, I had to listen to her. Otherwise, she would tell her mom and never take me out again. I nodded agreeably. Then my phone rang. It was Zhao Fu, the Tianjun Group's butler. He said he had new information about my family's massacre. Several major families in Dragon City had played a part, but only one had the power to wipe out the entire Yi family in a single night. A wave of hatred surged through me. I asked him coldly, "Who?" Zhao Fu's voice was trembling on the phone. He told me the name, Zhang Longhu. Zhang Longhu was known as the Underground Emperor of Dragon City. He was a former Special Forces soldier who got kicked out of the military for disobeying orders. After that, he spent years as a mercenary, then came to Dragon City and fought his way up through underground boxing rings. He was brutal and powerful. Every major family in the city feared him. He was the one who wiped out my entire family in a single night. And behind him, there were likely others pulling strings. My fingers dug into my own flesh until blood seeped out. The hatred was overwhelming. I told Zhao Fu to deliver a message to Zhang Longhu, wash his neck and wait. In 3 days, I would kill him. Zhao Fu hesitated. He warned me that Zhang Longhu controlled half of Dragon City's underworld, and that moving too fast might alert whoever was hiding behind him. I didn't care. I told him to let them all come. Anyone who had touched my family's blood would pay. Killing Zhang Longhu might actually draw out the real masterminds, and that was exactly what I wanted. It was time they learned that the Yi family had returned. I hung up and buried my fury deep inside. Mu Qing noticed something was off about my expression, but I smiled and told her it was nothing. I would never drag her family into this darkness. We drove to a 5-star hotel for the reunion. Expensive cars lined the entrance, and well-dressed young people filled the lobby. Qian was waiting outside, but her smile vanished the moment she saw me. She whispered to Mu Qing, asking why she brought me again. After the Yin Tianqi incident, Qian thought I was nothing but a reckless thug who knew a little bit of fighting. I just shook my head and smiled. I wasn't here to cause trouble. I had gotten good news today about my family's case, and I was in a decent mood. I just wanted to keep Mu Qing safe. Then a tall, handsome man walked through the crowd straight toward Mu Qing. His name was Chen Zifeng. He greeted her warmly and tried to shake her hand, but she refused and tried to walk past him. He blocked her path. He begged her to forgive him, saying he had changed after 3 years abroad and thought about her constantly. The girls watching from a distance sighed with envy. Chen Zifeng was the young master of a first-tier family in Dragon City that dealt in international trade. Any woman would want his attention, but Mu Qing despised him. Back in college, he had chased her relentlessly until she finally agreed to date him. Then one night, she caught him in bed with another woman. She was grateful she had never let him touch her. To her, his handsome face was just the face of a cheater. I stepped in front of him and told him to move. He hadn't even noticed me until that moment. Now, wearing the new LV clothes Mu Qing had bought me, I looked decent enough to catch his attention. He asked coldly if I was Mu Qing's new boyfriend. Everyone went quiet, waiting for her answer. After a brief pause, Mu Qing clenched her jaw and said, "So what if he is?" I was stunned. I came here as her companion, and suddenly I was her boyfriend. Before I could react, a guy in a black suit pushed his way out of the crowd. His name was Lu Wei, a small-time young master from a third-tier family who followed Chen Zifeng around like a loyal dog. He recognized me immediately and announced to everyone that I was the former Yi family heir, a convict fresh out of prison who had beaten up Yin Tianqi. The whole crowd burst out laughing. A convict? They jeered. Chen Zifeng's face lit up with arrogance, suddenly feeling superior again. I frowned. Here we go again. The crowd started whispering and laughing. They all recognized my name, the young master of the family that got wiped out. Some guy named Lu Wei, a lackey from a third-rate family who clung to Chen Zifeng, stared at Mu Qing and Qian disgustingly, then mocked me openly. He said I was trash who didn't deserve to stand next to Mu Qing, and insulted my family name. That was the line. Nobody insults the Yi family. I slapped him across the face so hard he spun and hit the ground. Blood dripped from his mouth. He didn't even see it coming. Chen Zifeng stepped forward, shielding his lackey, staring at me like he wanted to kill me. I stared right back without flinching. Qian whispered to Mu Qing that I was a hothead who only knew how to cause trouble, and that Chen Zifeng's family was far more powerful than the Yin family. Qian tried to explain that the whole boyfriend thing wasn't real, but Mu Qing cut her off. She stepped in front of me and told Chen Zifeng that if he wanted to get to me, he would have to go through her first. That surprised me. She was protecting me again. Chen Zifeng's jealousy was boiling, but he held himself together. He had organized this reunion and didn't want a scene. He let me off, for Mu Qing's sake. Lu Wei stormed inside, swearing revenge. The other students stared at me with pity and whispered that I was finished. Chen Zifeng never forgave anyone. They all thought Mu Qing had lost her mind dating a convict. Mu Qing glared at me. I told her I knew the boyfriend thing wasn't real and that she shouldn't worry. I hadn't taken it seriously. She got even more annoyed at how relaxed I was and dragged Qian inside. The rooftop of the hotel was decorated beautifully. Champagne towers, fancy food, everything first class. Mu Qing's classmates were all children of Dragon City's elite families. People came over to toast Mu Qing, but nobody paid any attention to me. I was the disgraced former young master that no one wanted to be seen with. Mu Qing asked me to go sit in a corner so she wouldn't have to introduce me to anyone. I agreed without complaint and went off to drink and eat by myself. That's when Yin Tianqi appeared. He showed up behind Qianqian with bandages on his arm and bruises still on his face. Mu Qing froze when she saw him. But instead of being angry, he smiled and apologized. He bowed deeply, drank 3 cups on his own, and said he had been blinded by rage that night. He promised never to bother her or me again. He even said he had already apologized to Qianqian. His attitude was so sincere that Mu Qing didn't know what to think. Something felt off to her, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Qianqian believed him completely. She suggested they toast Yin Tianqi to accept his apology. Under the dim lights, while the 2 girls weren't looking, Yin Tianqi quietly poured a white powder into 2 champagne glasses. Then he handed 1 glass to Mu Qing and 1 to Qianqian, saying if they didn't drink, it meant they hadn't truly forgiven him. They couldn't refuse. All 3 raised their glasses and drank. I was sitting in my corner, not watching. I had no idea what had just happened. Nobody noticed what Yin Tianqi had done. He stood there with a sinister smile, already fantasizing about what he planned to do to Mu Qing and Qianqian once the drug kicked in. Meanwhile, I was in my corner enjoying the food and wine. People kept throwing disgusted looks my way, calling me a country bumpkin who had never seen a proper party. Lu Wei was laughing with his friends, saying I would be crawling out of here before the night was over. He bragged that the Chun family owned 1/3 of this hotel, and that Chen Zifeng could have me thrown out with a single word. Sure enough, a squad of tall security guards marched in. They scanned the room and locked their eyes on me. Their leader gripped a baton and quietly told his men to break one of my legs. Chen Zifeng's orders. They surrounded me while I was mid-sip. The security captain called me a convict who had snuck into the party and ordered his men to tie me up. I swirled my wine glass and didn't even look at them. I said I was here with my girlfriend for a class reunion and asked what the problem was. That made the captain furious. He swung his baton at my head. Mu Qing saw what was happening and screamed for them to stop. The captain ignored her. I dodged his swing easily. Then I moved through all of them. Punches, kicks, fluid and precise. In seconds, 7 or 8 guards were flying through the air and crashing to the ground. The captain's arm snapped. I hadn't spilled a single drop from my glass. The whole rooftop went silent. Lu Wei's grin froze on his face. Chen Zifeng looked like he had swallowed something rotten. I drained my glass and stared directly at Chen Zifeng. If he wanted trouble, I was happy to deliver. Then the hotel's general manager showed up, a man in his 40s named Li Jinshan. He bowed to Chen Zifeng first, then turned to me with an arrogant expression and demanded to know who I was. I told him it was none of his business. He and his people laughed like I was insane. One of his men threw a stack of cash at me, saying it was money for me to get my brain checked. Another ordered me to kneel and knock my head on the ground 3 times for Chen Zifeng and Li Jinshan, and then maybe they would let me leave. The crowd whispered excitedly. They said this hotel belonged to the Tianjun Group, that Li Jinshan had been personally appointed by the Tianjun Group's chairman, and that causing trouble here was suicide. Everyone was eager to watch my downfall. Only Mu Qing looked worried, sick, regretting that she ever brought me. I stayed completely calm. I pulled out my phone and made a call. Zhao Fu answered. I told him someone at the Dragon City Grand Hotel wanted me to crawl out on my knees. I gave him 2 names, Li Jinshan and Chen Zifeng. I told him he had 3 minutes. I hung up casually. On the other end, Zhao Fu slammed his fist on the table. Sweat broke out on his forehead. He cursed these fools for daring to mess with me and ordered his car immediately. His Rolls-Royce tore through the city streets at 180 kilometers per hour, racing toward the hotel. Up on the rooftop, Li Jinshan was laughing at me, threatening to destroy me. Mu Qing couldn't take it anymore. She stepped forward and begged Chen Zifeng to let me go, saying it was all her fault. She pulled at my arm, trying to get me to apologize. I noticed she seemed a little dizzy, but she steadied herself. Behind us, Yin Tianqi was watching everything with a hidden grin. He was thrilled that I had picked a fight with Chen Zifeng and Li Jinshan, because it kept everyone distracted from what he was really planning. He had drugged Mu Qing and Qianqian's drinks. He checked his watch. The drug would take full effect in 30 minutes. He walked over and held Mu Qing's arm, pretending to be helpful. I saw the greed in his eyes as he touched her, but I was dealing with the situation in front of me. Li Jinshan and Chun Zifeng stood there smugly, waiting to see who I had called. Then the sound of roaring engines came from outside. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, everyone could see over a dozen luxury cars screeching to a halt below. Chun Zifeng spotted his father's car and laughed. He assumed his dad had come to join the fun and help deal with me. Then someone shouted that they recognized the man stepping out of a Rolls-Royce. It was Zhao Fu, the chairman of the Tianjun group. Chun Zifeng felt even more confident. He figured between his father and the Tianjun group's boss, I was as good as dead. Mu Qing was frantic, begging me to apologize before it was too late. I stood perfectly still with my hands behind my back. The rooftop doors exploded open. Chun Zifeng's father, Chun En, stormed in. Chun Zifeng ran toward him with a victory smile on his face. His father slapped him so hard he flew across the room and crashed into the floor. Glass shattered everywhere. Chun En screamed at his son, calling him a disgrace. He ripped off his belt and beat Chun Zifeng savagely in front of everyone until his skin was torn and bleeding. Chun Zifeng had no idea what was happening. He begged his father to explain, but the beating didn't stop. Everyone watched in horror. Lu Wei nearly fell over and started backing toward the exit. I checked my watch. Exactly 3 minutes. Right on time. Zhao Fu approached me and apologized for the disturbance. I gave him a look that said to handle it. Chun En finally stopped when he was too exhausted to continue. Chun Zifeng lay on the floor, barely conscious. His father turned and bowed deeply to Zhao Fu and me, begging forgiveness for his son's behavior. He quoted an old saying, "When a son goes wrong, it's the father's fault." Zhao Fu glanced at me. I had seen enough. He waved his hand and told them to get out and never let it happen again. Chun En dragged his unconscious son away without looking back. The entire room stood frozen. Nobody knew who I really was, but the way Zhao Fu and Chun En had treated me told them everything they needed to know. Lu Wei slipped through the crowd and ran for his life. I turned around to find Mu Qing, but she was gone. At that moment, in a large bedroom somewhere in the hotel, Yin Tianqi had carried Mu Qing and Qianqian onto a bed. They were dizzy, burning up, and barely conscious. They didn't understand what was happening to them. Yin Tianqi was waiting for the drug to take full effect so they would pass out completely. I had no idea where they were. Back at the party, Zhao Fu dealt with Li Jinshan. His bodyguard slapped the man until his nose bled, then made him kneel. Li Jinshan begged and cried, swearing it was all Chun Zifeng's fault. Zhao Fu didn't care. He fired Li Jinshan on the spot and had him dragged out. The man had spent his whole career climbing to that position, and now it was gone, all because he picked a fight with me. After Zhao Fu left, the mood at the party completely changed. The same rich kids who had been mocking me minutes ago were suddenly lining up to toast me. I wasn't interested. I had made more of a scene than I wanted to, but sometimes you have to show your teeth or people think you're a pushover. I looked around for Mu Qing and Qianqian, but they were nowhere in sight. I frowned, thinking maybe they were avoiding me because I had caused trouble again. I went downstairs and saw Mu Qing's red Audi still parked outside, so they hadn't left. I called her phone. No answer. Something felt wrong. What I didn't know yet was that 300 meters from the hotel, in a building on a street controlled by the underworld, Mu Qing and Qianqian were lying on a bed, barely conscious. The drug Yin Tianqi had slipped into their champagne was taking full effect. Mu Qing was burning up and struggling to stay awake. She tried to shake Qianqian, but Qianqian was already out cold. Mu Qing realized something was very wrong. She knew her alcohol tolerance, and a few glasses of champagne would never do this to her. Outside the room, Yin Tianqi was about to go in and do the unthinkable. But just before he could open the door, a hand grabbed his shoulder hard. He turned around and found himself face to face with over a dozen thugs in black suits. Their leader was a young man named Zhang Taigang, the son of Zhang Longhu, the underground emperor of Dragon City. The same Zhang Longhu who had murdered my entire family. This whole street was Zhang Tiegong's territory, including that building. His lookouts had spotted Yin Tianqi bringing 2 beautiful women upstairs and reported it immediately. Zhang Taigang slapped Yin Tianqi across the face and cursed him for operating on his turf without permission. Yin Tianqi groveled and tried to explain, but Zhang Taigang wasn't interested in his excuses. Then Zhang Taigang said the words that made Yin Tianqi's stomach drop. "Those 2 girls. I'll be taking them. Now get lost." His thugs grinned and cracked their knuckles. Everyone knew Zhang Tiegong's habits. After he was done, he would let his men have their turn. That was how he kept their loyalty. Yin Tianqi's face twisted with regret. If he had known this would happen, he never would have brought Mu Qing and Qianqian here. And I was still outside the hotel, searching, with no idea where they were. Zhang Taigang kicked the door open and ordered his thugs to guard the entrance. Inside, Mu Qing was barely conscious. She saw him walking toward her with a sickening grin and tried to stand, but the drug made her collapse. He told her he had chased Yin Tianqi away, and that tonight, he would be the one taking care of her. He stared at her body without any shame. Mu Qing was terrified. She screamed at him to stay back and threatened him with her family name. Zhang Taigang laughed. His father was Zhang Longhu, the underground emperor. He said the Sun family was nothing but a tiny third-rate clan, and if her father dared complain, he would wipe them out entirely. Desperate, Mu Qing grabbed her phone and called Yin Tianqi, begging him to find me. But Yin Tianqi was standing right outside the door, too cowardly to make a sound. He hung up without saying a word. Then she called me. I heard her scream my name. Save me. Before the line went noisy and cut out. I heard her yelling at someone to let her go. I was already on my way. I had asked the hotel security and learned that Yin Tianqi had taken the girls somewhere. My gut told me something terrible was happening. Inside the room, Mu Qing slapped Zhang Taigang across the face. That only made him angrier. He hit her back hard. She fell onto the bed, her body going limp from the drug. Her vision blurred. She thought about Yin Tianqi coming to rescue her, not knowing he had been the one who drugged her in the first place. Then she passed out completely. Zhang Taigang reached for her with one hand and started undoing his belt with the other. That's when I arrived. I kicked the door off its hinges. His thugs flew backward like straw in the wind. I stepped into the room and saw Mu Qing and Qianqian unconscious on the bed, their clothes disheveled. The rage inside me turned ice cold. Zhang Taigang cursed at me for interrupting him. His men scrambled to their feet, terrified, telling him they couldn't stop me. He demanded to know who I was and dropped his father's name, Zhang Longhu. When I heard that name, my eyes narrowed. Zhang Longhu, the man who slaughtered my family. And now his son was here, trying to violate my god-sister. What a small world. Zhang Taigang mistook my silence for fear and started counting down from 3. He didn't get past the first number. I moved so fast I vanished from his sight. My fist connected with his face and sent him crashing into the wall. Blood poured from his nose. He screamed for backup. His men charged in with machetes and baseball bats. I didn't flinch. I closed my eyes for a moment and unleashed my internal energy for the first time. The pressure in the room became suffocating. The temperature seemed to drop. His thugs could barely breathe under the weight of my aura. I looked at Zhang Taigang and said, "To destroy you, I only need one finger." His face went white with terror. He stammered, You're a martial artist." Zhang Taigang panicked and offered 1,000 million to anyone who could kill me. His thugs had been frozen with fear, but the promise of that kind of money made them forget their terror. They charged. The leader swung a massive cleaver at my skull. I tilted my body slightly, caught the blade between 2 fingers, and shattered it with my internal energy. The broken piece buried itself in his chest. Then I moved through the rest of them. In seconds, every single thug was on the ground, and none of them would ever get up again. I dusted off my clothes and turned to Zhang Taigang. He was trembling, fumbling to tighten his belt. The woman chasing bravado was completely gone. He dropped to his knees and begged. He offered me money, 5,000 million, then 100 million. He offered to let me work for his father so I could rule Dragon City. He had no idea that his father Zhang Longhu was the man I was planning to kill in 3 days. I kicked his kneecap and shattered it. He screamed and sobbed, offering me everything. The girls, his money, anything. I told him that if I let him go, he would keep hurting innocent women for the rest of his life. A monster like him deserved death. But killing him now wasn't part of my plan yet. So instead, I stomped on the one thing that mattered most to him. I crushed it completely. He passed out from the pain, lying in a pool of his own blood. Zhang Taigang would never harm another woman again. I rushed to the bed and checked on Mu Qing. Her breathing was stable, but her skin was burning red from whatever drug Yin Tianqi had given her. I was furious. I carried Mu Qing downstairs and put her in the car. Then I went back for Qianqian and brought her to the Dragon City Grand Hotel, where I personally ordered Zhao Fu to have people guard her safety through the night. I drove Mu Qing home. My godparents were still awake. My godfather nearly spit out his tea when he saw me carrying his daughter. I told my godmother that Mu Qing had simply drunk too much. I didn't want her worrying about what really happened. My godmother believed me and told me to take Mu Qing upstairs. My godfather was less trusting. He glared at me suspiciously, probably thinking I had gotten his daughter drunk on purpose. My godmother snapped at him to shut up. I laid Mu Qing on her bed and made her some honey water. The drug was just causing unconsciousness. She would wake up by morning. As I came back downstairs, my godfather stopped me. He said since I had no job, he would have Mu Qing arrange one for me. His real motive was obvious. He wanted to keep me busy and away from his daughter. I agreed without argument. Back in my room, I sat cross-legged and began absorbing the yuan-yang energy again. I could feel my hidden injuries were almost fully healed. Once they were, I could absorb the entire energy vein and break through to the Qidong realm. One level's difference in cultivation meant a world of difference in power. Meanwhile, Yin Tianqi had fled the moment he saw me arrive at the building. He knew he couldn't fight me. He assumed Zhang Tiegong's men would deal with me, and was relieved that I apparently hadn't discovered he was the one who drugged the girls. He figured that now I had offended Zhang Taigang. My days were numbered. What he didn't know was that Zhang Taigang was now permanently destroyed, and that he himself had barely escaped my wrath once again. The next morning, Mu Qing woke up with a splitting headache. She couldn't remember anything clearly after seeing Zhang Tiegong's face. Everything after that was a blank. She checked her body and her clothes. Everything was intact. She was relieved. She called Qianqian, but Qianqian didn't remember anything either. Then she called Yin Tianqi. That snake saw his chance. He told her that Zhang Taigang had tried to assault them, and that he, Yin Tianqi, had been the one who saved them. Then he added the lie that destroyed me in her eyes. He said when she called me for help, I saw Zhang Tiegong's men and ran away like a coward. He claimed he was the one who stood between them and danger, and even took a slap from Zhang Taigang for it. Mu Qing believed every word. She was genuinely grateful. She even agreed to have dinner with him as a thank you, the first time she had ever accepted his invitation. Yin Tianqi was thrilled, already scheming about how to use this to get closer to her. When Mu Qing worried about Zhang Longhu coming after them for revenge, Yin Tianqi puffed out his chest and said that the Yin, Sun, and Su families together would be strong enough to stand against him. That calmed her down. And just like that, she started thinking of herself and Yin Tianqi as being on the same side. Meanwhile, in her mind, I had dropped several more levels. She thought I was a coward who ran at the first sign of danger. She came downstairs that morning and glared at me like I was her worst enemy. I had no idea what was going on. She snapped at me about running away last night. I was completely confused. I was the one who had fought through Zhang Tiegong's thugs, carried her home, and made her honey water. But she didn't know any of that. My godmother scolded her for being rude to me after I had carried her home. Then my godfather brought up the job idea. Mu Qing's eyes lit up with spite. She said her father's company needed a security guard at the front gate, and that I was perfect for it. My godmother objected, but I quickly agreed. I told her being a security guard was fine. It didn't bother me at all. Mu Qing marched out the door without looking back. I didn't understand what had gotten into her, but I figured I wouldn't push it. Whatever Yin Tianqi had told her, the truth would come out eventually. Across the city, in the most luxurious villa district in Dragon City, Zhang Taigang was lying in bed wrapped in bandages, blood still seeping through his pants. He was crying to his father, begging him to avenge him. He wanted to torture me for 3 days and 3 nights. His father sat on the sofa, smoking, his face dark as a storm cloud. Then Zhang Longhu, the underground emperor, the man who destroyed my family, kicked his coffee table in half with one blow. He swore he would grind me into paste and feed me to dogs. He didn't know that in 3 days, I was coming for him. Zhang Longhu was boiling with rage over what I had done to his son. Then one of his guards burst through the door in a panic, carrying a letter sealed with golden wax, delivered personally by Zhao Fu, the chairman of the Tianjun group. Sitting on the couch nearby was Li Zihong, the head of the Li family. He was one of the people who had profited from my family's destruction. He had carved up our assets and used them to climb from a second-tier family to first-tier status in just 3 years. Zhang Taigang got excited when he heard the Tianjun group's name. He thought they must be coming to form an alliance with his father, and fantasized about the Zhang family becoming unstoppable. Zhang Longhu tore open the letter eagerly. Then his face turned white. The message was written in bold red characters. By the order of the Tianjun Group's young master, in 3 days, the Zhang family will be destroyed, and Zhang Longhu's life will be taken. Wash your neck and wait. He exploded with fury. He crushed the letter to dust with his bare internal energy. Zhang Taigang nearly fell off his bed in terror. Li Zihong was stunned too. None of them could understand why the Tianjun Group would suddenly target the Zhang family. Li Zihong raised a sharp question. He had seen Zhao Fu before, but in 3 years of the Tianjun Group operating in Dragon City, nobody had ever heard of a young master. Where did this person come from? Zhang Taigang, being the coward he was, begged his father to flee to another city. Zhang Longhu slapped him across the head and called him pathetic. Then Zhang Longhu gave his orders. He summoned every fighter and martial arts expert in the Zhang family. He deployed heavy weapons and set up 24-hour armed patrols around his compound. Machine guns were mounted on the walls. He wasn't going to run. He also promised Zhang Taigang 2 things. Tomorrow he would send elite killers to take me out quietly, and he would kidnap Mu Qing and Qianqian for his son to take out his frustrations on. I knew none of this yet. The next day, Mu Qing was still furious with me. Thanks to Yin Tianqi's lies, she believed I had been a coward who ran away while Yin Tianqi heroically saved her. She had even agreed to have dinner with Yin Tianqi as a thank you, the first time she had ever accepted his invitation. She drove us to a fancy restaurant to meet Yin Tianqi, with me tagging along like an unwelcome shadow. She had also reluctantly agreed to arrange a job for me at her father's company. The position she chose? Security guard at the front gate. When we arrived, Yin Tianqi was standing outside in polished boots, dressed sharply, waiting with a confident smile. But the moment he saw my face, his expression froze and his confidence crumbled. He knew the truth about last night, and he knew that if I ever found out what he had done, he was a dead man. Qianqian was the first to run up to Yin Tianqi when we arrived, gushing with gratitude. Then Mu Qing thanked him too, for saving them from Zhang Taigang, for sending her home. She even apologized for misjudging him before. I stood there completely baffled. Saving them? Sending her home? That was me. I did all of that. When I heard Mu Qing thank Yin Tianqi for sending her home, I finally understood what had happened. That shameless liar had taken full credit for everything I did. I stepped forward and told them they had it wrong. I was the one who brought them home. Mu Qing spun around and screamed at me. She called me shameless for running away and then trying to steal the credit. Qianqian threatened to call the police on me. I grabbed Yin Tianqi by the collar and told him to confess. But with both girls defending him, he played innocent perfectly. He said he saw me drive away with his own eyes. I looked at these 2 foolish girls siding with the man who had drugged them, and I almost laughed. I let go of Yin Tianqi and told them to stay away from him. But Mu Qing told me to worry about myself instead. Then Yin Tianqi put on his greatest performance yet, acting magnanimous, saying I probably just drank too much and forgot what happened, calling me brother and inviting me to eat with them. The girls looked at his generosity, then looked at me, and their contempt for me grew even deeper. I didn't go upstairs with them. I told them to enjoy their meal and got in the car. I wasn't going to waste energy arguing. The truth would surface eventually. While I sat in the car, I watched Yin Tianqi's eyes carefully before they went up. I was now certain he was the one who drugged their drinks that night. I would deal with him when the time was right. Then Zhao Fu called. He reported that my message had been delivered to Zhang Longhu. The Zhang family compound was now fully armed. Martial arts experts, heavy weapons, machine guns on the walls, 24-hour patrols. Zhao Fu asked if I wanted him to arrange troops to help take them down. I told him no. Zhang Longhu's life was mine to take personally. I just needed him to keep eyes on Zhang Longhu's every move. My only worry was that the coward might try to run. Meanwhile, news had spread across Dragon City that Zhang Taigang had been permanently crippled, and that Zhang Longhu was mobilizing fighters to get revenge. The whole city was buzzing. Everyone wanted to know who had the guts to touch the underground emperor's son. An hour later, Mu Qing and Qianqian came back down from the restaurant. Yin Tianqi followed behind them, looking satisfied. His plan was working. He had gained their trust. Qianqian waved goodbye to him warmly. Mu Qing was actually smiling. They got in the car and found me asleep. Mu Qing shook me awake and said she was taking me to her father's company to start my new job as a security guard. Mu Qing drove me straight to her father's company, Zhonghai Group. The building wasn't bad. Not exactly top tier for Dragon City, but the Sun family had done well for themselves over the years. She pointed at the security booth by the front gate and announced that this little shack was my new workplace. It was about 40 square meters with a bed and some basic supplies. I asked how much she would pay me. She pretended to think about it, then said 3,000 yuan a month. She looked very pleased with herself. I didn't care about the money. I had my own reasons for being here. She took me upstairs to show me around. The employees noticed me immediately. They started whispering, assuming I was Mu Qing's boyfriend from some wealthy family. One lovesick male employee dramatically complained that his goddess was taken. The women stared at me with curious eyes. Apparently, the energy I had been absorbing from the Yuan-Yang vein was refining my body. My skin, my presence, my aura were all improving. I gave off something people couldn't quite explain. On the way up, I asked Mu Qing how her father's business was doing. She said it was okay, but nothing amazing. She told me to mind my own business and just be a good little security guard. We reached the top floor and met her secretary, Zhao Xiaoyu. That's when I overheard something interesting. There was a piece of undeveloped land in Dragon City's most valuable business district. The Sun family wanted it badly, but it had been snatched up by Fuhua Group, run by Chen Jin, Chun An's younger brother. Originally, Chen Jin had agreed to sell it for just 10% above market price. Now he was demanding 30% more. Mu Qing was stressed about it. When Zhao Xiaoyu asked her what to do, she didn't have an answer. That's when I spoke up. I told her to leave it to me. I could get that land for her. She stared at me, then put her hand on my forehead to check if I had a fever. She thought I was insane. I had just offended Chen Zifeng, the Chun family's eldest son, and now I was claiming I could make a deal with the Chen family? She laughed it off as more of my ridiculous boasting. I didn't bother explaining. I stepped outside and called Zhao Fu. Within 30 minutes, he arranged everything. He called back with Chun An's personal number, saying Chun An was already waiting for my call. At that very moment, in the Chun family mansion, Chun An was pacing back and forth excitedly. His son Chen Zifeng sat nearby with his arm in a sling, confused. Chun An turned to him and said something that made Chen Zifeng think his father had lost his mind. From now on, you will treat young Master Yi like your own father. This is our family's last chance. Chen Zifeng had no idea what was happening. To him, I was still just a convict. Chen Zifeng threw a fit when his father told him to treat me like his own father. He was still furious about what happened at the party and wanted revenge. But Chen An exploded. He nearly ripped off his belt again to beat his son a second time. Chen Zifeng's mother had to step between them. Then Chen An told his son the truth. I was the chairman of the Tianjun group. I was the young master of the Yi family. I was, in his words, the sky above Dragon City. Chen Zifeng's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the floor, face white with shock. He couldn't believe it. The convict he had tried to humiliate was the most powerful person in the city. He suddenly realized that if his father hadn't beaten him and apologized on his behalf at the hotel, the entire Chen family might have been wiped out. He scrambled to his feet and swore he would treat me like his own father from now on. He accidentally said I was his father, then quickly corrected himself. He was terrified I might come after him for what happened at the party. Chun An reassured him. As long as he behaved from now on, I probably wouldn't hold a grudge. He told his son that the Chun family's entire future depended on getting into my good graces, and he warned him to keep my identity an absolute secret. Then I made my call. Chun An picked up on the first ring and practically bent in half bowing, even though I couldn't see him. I got straight to the point. I told him the Fuhua Group, which his family controlled, was sitting on a piece of land that Zhonghai Group wanted to buy. I said my sister wanted it, and that I had heard Fuhua was demanding 50% above market price. He asked who my sister was. I said, Sun Muqing. Chen Zifeng was listening in, his face twisted with regret when he heard her name. The girl he had been obsessing over and harassing was my sister. He had almost destroyed his family's future over his own stupidity. Chen An didn't hesitate. He offered to give the land to Mu Qing for free. He promised that from that day forward, the Chen family would be the Sun family's strongest ally. He said he would come to us immediately. I hung up, satisfied. When I walked back inside the office, Mu Qing was standing there with her arms crossed, looking at me like I was an idiot. She smirked and asked if I really thought one phone call could make Fuhua Group hand over that land. I told Mu Qing it was just a piece of land, no big deal. If I wanted, I could take the whole city. But of course she didn't believe me. She turned to her secretary Zhao Xiaoyu and laughed, saying I was nothing but a blowhard. Zhao Xiaoyu looked at me and figured that must be why Mu Qing had made me a security guard, to humble me. She handed me my employee badge. Just like that, I was officially a security guard at Zhonghai Group. Mu Qing decided she would go to Fuhua Group herself and try to buy the land, even if it meant paying 50% extra. She grabbed the contract documents and was about to head out. Finally free of me, she looked relieved. I stopped her. I checked my watch and told her to wait. Someone was on their way. She didn't need to go anywhere. Who? She asked, confused. Right then, a Rolls-Royce with the license plate, a 99999, screeched to a halt outside the building. Chunin and Chen Zifeng got out and rushed inside. Mu Qing panicked. She saw Chen Zifeng with his arm in bandages and immediately assumed he was here for revenge over what happened at the party. She grabbed my arm and tried to push me into hiding, begging me to let her handle it. She was sure Chunin had come to destroy me. I shook her off, leaned back on the sofa, crossed my legs, and asked if anyone had a cigarette. She was furious. She couldn't understand why I was so calm with two angry Chen family members storming in. But she squared her shoulders and said she would stand between me and them. She blamed herself for telling Chen Zifeng I was her boyfriend. Then the door opened, and Chunin walked in, sweating, smiling, and bowing to Mu Qing. He introduced himself, shook her hand, and apologized for not delivering the land sooner. He said the property was a free gift, a token of goodwill. He handed over a signed contract with Fuhua Group's official seal. No charge. 0. Free. Mu Qing's brain stopped working. She stared at the contract, then at Chunin, then at me. This land was worth a fortune, and the head of the Chen family had just personally driven over to give it away. Chen Zifeng bowed his head low and sincerely apologized for everything he had done to her. The same man who had been arrogant and possessive was now practically groveling. Mu Qing felt like she was dreaming. She pinched her own leg just to make sure she was awake. Then I spoke up and asked if anyone had a cigarette. Chunin practically tripped over himself, pulling a pack from his pocket and lighting one for me. I took a long drag and let the smoke curl around my fingers. Mu Qing stared at me with a strange look, like she was seeing someone she didn't recognize. Chunin almost bowed to me properly, but I shot him a look and he caught himself. He greeted me as Mr. Yi instead. Chen Zifeng followed suit, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. Mu Qing looked back and forth between us. I told her we had made peace, and that she should accept the gift. She was bewildered. Could I really have made this happen? I explained it away by saying Chunin was friends with Zhao Yu's brother, and since I knew Zhao Yu, the connection brought us together. It was a weak lie, but Mu Qing's head was spinning too much to notice. She carefully tucked the contract away, still not entirely sure if any of this was real. Mu Qing quickly ordered Zhao Xiaoyu to make tea for the Chen family. The secretary watched how Chunin and Chen Zifeng acted around me, and her eyes went wide. She could tell I held a position far above what a security guard badge suggested. Chunin made Chen Zifeng apologize again and told him to learn from Mu Qing and me. Chen Zifeng nodded obediently like a scolded child. Mu Qing was impressed. She thought if the father was this capable, maybe the son wasn't completely hopeless. Even though she despised Chen Zifeng's past behavior, the Chen family's power made them valuable business partners. Then, Chunin mentioned something about the land. He said the place had been acting strange lately. Workers had been getting sick, their bodies turning stiff as stone, like they were possessed by something. He wanted Mu Qing to inspect it herself before taking ownership. Mu Qing was puzzled. She had already visited the site before, and a feng shui master had confirmed it was an excellent location. She thanked Chunin and said she would check it out that afternoon. The Chen family left. As we headed out, Mu Qing gave me a suspicious look. She asked how I could possibly have that much influence over the Chen family. I brushed it off, saying it was probably the Tianjun group wanting to do business with her, since I knew Zhao Yu's brother. She didn't fully buy it, but she couldn't figure out the truth either. I told her I wanted to come along to see the land, especially to find out what was supposedly so strange about it. She glared at me for skipping work on my first day as security guard, but since she was in a good mood over the free land, she let it slide. We drove to the site near Dragon Lake. the most expensive land in Dragon City. It was a massive plot surrounded by fencing with workers inside. We had barely stepped out of the car when a Rolls-Royce came roaring up behind us. Zhang Tao and Li Yaqing climbed out with an entourage of suited men. Zhang Tao spotted me immediately. He sneered and told me to get out of the way, asking what a convict was doing here. He said he was here to look at the land. He tried to shove past me, ramming his shoulder into mine. Bad move. It was like hitting a concrete pillar. He stumbled and nearly fell, his bones cracking from the impact. Li Yaqing lost it. She screamed that I had the nerve to bump her future husband and swung her palm at my face. I caught her hand midair. Then I slapped her across the face. I told her I was done being polite. She was the one who had attacked me, and I was tired of letting her off easy. She shrieked that I had actually hit her and ordered Zhang Tao to break my leg. Zhang Tao's men surrounded me. He glared at me and said whichever hand I used to hit his wife, he would destroy it. Just as they were closing in, a voice boomed from nearby. Stop, someone was coming, and they didn't sound happy. Chunin and Chun Zifeng came marching up just in time. Chunin walked straight up to Zhang Tao, and without a word, slapped him so hard he flew sideways. Then he stepped on Zhang Tao's face and twisted his shoe. Zhang Tao was bleeding and confused. His family had a good relationship with the Chen family, and Chun Jin, Chun N's younger brother, had personally invited him to come look at this land. He tried to explain, but Chunin wasn't having it. He screamed that the land had already been given to Mu Qing and told Zhang Tao to get lost. Then Chunin asked if Zhang Tao had really just threatened to break my arm. He beat him several more times. Li Yaqing turned white and backed away. Chun Zifeng kicked Zhang Tao in the chest for good measure, warning him that disrespecting Mr. Yi again would cost him both legs. Zhang Tao was devastated. He had come for a business deal and left with a broken face and all his partnerships with the Chun family canceled. Billions of yuan gone in an instant. Li Yaqing stared at my back as I walked away, her expression hollow. She couldn't understand how a convict commanded this kind of respect. I didn't give either of them a second thought. Chunin led us into the property, but after a few minutes, he stopped. He said he couldn't go any further. The place gave him chills. He sneezed and warned us it was cursed. His workers had been getting sick, their bodies going stiff like stone. I felt it immediately. A bone-piercing cold was seeping up from the ground, cutting through even my powerful internal energy. But when I looked at Mu Qing, she seemed completely fine. She felt nothing at all. Chun Zifeng was shivering and covered in goosebumps. I circulated my yang energy to warm the area around us. Chun took his people and left. I told Mu Qing there was an extreme cold energy radiating from the ground. In the middle of summer, this kind of freezing cold meant something extraordinary was buried here. She had no idea what I was talking about. I pressed forward until we reached a large lake at the center of the property. Cold mist hung over the water like a white veil. I could feel the source was down there. Before Mu Qing could stop me, I jumped in. Minutes later, I surfaced holding a glowing white stone. It was a supreme cold object, the source of all the strange energy. The cold was so intense that even my internal power struggled against it. But when Mu Qing grabbed it from my hand, she felt nothing. She turned it over and shrugged, calling it an ordinary pebble. That's when it hit me. I stared at her in shock. She got uncomfortable and asked why I was looking at her like that. I told her to keep the stone as a gift. It might be useful someday. I said she needed to store it in a volcanic stone box, which I would get for her later. The truth was now clear. No ordinary person could hold a supreme cold object without freezing. No martial artist could absorb its energy. But there was one exception, someone born with the 5 body. Mu Qing had the 5 body, an incredibly rare constitution, and she had no idea. I kept Mu Qing's secret to myself, her 5 body. With the right guidance, she could enter the martial arts world, and her progress would be faster than mine. That was why she couldn't feel the freezing cold at all. After we finished touring the land, Chunin had already left. The place was perfect. Once the cold stone was removed, the area would actually become a cool retreat in summer without making anyone sick. I told Mu Qing to keep the stone safe and not show it to anyone. If the wrong martial artist saw it, it could bring trouble. By the time we got home, it was dark. Mu Qing was exhausted but still suspicious. She pulled me outside and demanded to know my real relationship with the Chen family. I stuck to my story. Chunin was Zhao Yu's brother's friend, so he was my friend too. She didn't believe me, but couldn't prove otherwise. Then she checked her phone, and her face went pale. News had spread across Dragon City. Zhang Longhu was sending killers after Yin Tianqi for crippling Zhang Taigang. Of course, the truth was that I was the one who destroyed Zhang Taigang, not Yin Tianqi. But thanks to Yin Tianqi's lies, Mu Qing believed he was the hero. She panicked and said she had to warn Yin Tianqi immediately. I told her to worry about herself instead. Zhang Tiegang's men would come for her too. But she wouldn't listen. She threw on a jacket, jumped in her car, and sped off to find Yin Tianqi, leaving me standing in the street. I cursed under my breath. This woman was going to get herself killed over a man who had drugged her. I flagged down a taxi and chased after her. Meanwhile, Yin Tianqi was lounging in his villa with a woman in his arms when Mu Qing's call came through. When she told him assassins were coming for him, his teacup shattered on the floor. He was terrified. He had only lied to impress her. He never imagined Zhang Longhu would actually put a hit out with his name on it. He considered going to the Zhang family and confessing everything just to save his own skin. In the darkness, black-clad figures were racing through the city at inhuman speed, leaving afterimages in the air. They were martial artists, sent by Zhang Longhu. Mu Qing was speeding through the streets when a blinding light hit her windshield. She slammed on the brakes. Shadows leaped onto the road and charged at her car. "Are you Sun Mu Qing?" the leader asked. She stammered yes. He smashed through her car window with his bare fist and reached for her arm. But I was already there. I appeared in front of her so fast the assassin barely had time to react. He jumped back and stared at me. Mu Qing was frozen in shock. The assassin grinned when he saw me. Apparently they were looking for both of us. He said cutting off my head would complete their mission. I told them they were pathetic. If Zhang Longhu sent them to die, I would happily collect their lives. The leader was in his 40s, his body radiating the stench of blood, a man who had killed many times. He pulled out a dagger and lunged at me, the blade cutting an arc of light through the darkness. I threw one punch. His entire body exploded. Blood mist filled the air. The other three froze in absolute terror. One punch, that was all it took. Mu Qing screamed and covered her mouth. She had never seen anything like this in her life. The remaining assassins stared at each other, eyes wide with fear. One of them whispered, "He's a martial artist." I looked at them with contempt and said calling them rotten fish and shrimp was being too generous. I told Mu Qing to close her eyes. I didn't want blood splashing on her or the violence scarring her. She asked who these people were. Her mind was still on Yin Tianqi. I told her coldly, they were here to kill me. The three remaining assassins attacked together, closing in from all sides. My body flickered like a ghost, leaving afterimages on the ground. Mu Qing watched from the car, terrified and confused. The man fighting out there didn't look like the person she thought she knew. Their blades sliced through the air at my throat, dozens of lethal strikes in seconds. Not one touched even the edge of my clothes. I smiled and asked if this was really the best they could do. Mu Qing was sweating, worried about me, but also scared for herself. She was confused. If Zhang Longhu wanted Yin Tianqi dead, why were these killers coming after me? I punched one of them and sent him flying dozens of meters. He crashed to the ground, vomiting blood. He was a martial artist at the body-tempering level, strong enough to dominate all of Dragon City. But he couldn't touch me. The remaining two realized I had been toying with them the entire time. I walked over to the fallen one, stepped on his chest, and looked down at him. He begged for his life, offering to become my servant, my dog, anything. I told him it was too late. I crushed his skull under my foot. The other two tried to run. I appeared in front of them before they could take a step. They dropped to their knees, smashing their foreheads against the ground until blood pooled at my feet. They begged and cried. I grabbed both by the neck, lifted them like chickens, and snapped their necks with a gentle squeeze. I dusted myself off and walked back to Mu Qing. She was white as a sheet. "You killed people," she whispered, staring at me like I was a stranger. I told her these men were Zhang Longhu's killers who had done terrible things to innocent people. They deserved to die. If I let them go, more innocent lives would be lost, and some of them may have been involved in my family's massacre. She was in no condition to drive, so I got behind the wheel and took her home. I told her to stop worrying about Yin Tianqi. That snake was perfectly safe. She needed to worry about herself and Qianqian instead. I told her to stay home and let me handle everything. Back at the apartment, she locked herself in her room and called Qian to make sure she was okay. Qian was fine. Mu Qing hung up, but kept replaying the bloody scene in her head. I knocked on her door and brought her a cup of hot water. I didn't say anything. I just set it down and left. She needed time. This was the first time she had seen the real world, and it would take a while to process. But eventually, she would be okay. Downstairs, my godmother had made a late-night snack. My godfather stumbled in drunk, grinning ear to ear. He couldn't stop talking about the incredible news. The Qin family had given him a prime piece of land for free, worth at least 500 million in a few years. Then he turned to me with that familiar condescending look. He said I was a grown man who had ended up as a security guard, and that all of Mu Qing's friends were rich kids while I was nothing. My godmother exploded. She reminded him he had been just a regular worker at 20, told him to stop being cruel to me, and threatened to kick him out of the house permanently. She turned to me with a warm smile and told me to ignore him. I just smiled. My godfather had no idea that the land he was celebrating, the windfall that made his whole night, was a gift I had arranged for his family. The next morning, I left the Sun family's apartment. The 3 days were up. It was time to take Zhang Longhu's life. At the Zhang family compound, Zhang Longhu was lounging on his sofa, laughing. 3 days had passed, and nobody from the Tianjun group had shown up. Machine guns lined the walls. Snipers crouched on rooftops. Hundreds of armed guards patrolled every corner. Zhang Taigang was grinning from his bed, boasting that anyone who came would be turned into Swiss cheese. Inside the main hall, 20 martial arts experts stood in 2 rows, killers who had walked through fire and blood, loyal to Zhang Longhu alone. He had prepared all of this as his gift for the Tianjun group. Zhang Longhu's brother Zhang Longting mocked the Tianjun group, saying they were too scared to show up. Then 4 of the 24 spirit tablets on the altar cracked and shattered. The hall went silent. Those tablets were linked to the 4 assassins sent to kill me. Broken tablets meant they were dead. Zhang Tiegong's confidence evaporated instantly. He suddenly remembered, I was a martial artist. But he couldn't believe I had killed all 4 by myself. Zhang Longhu frowned. He assumed I must have had help. Then a guard rushed in. Someone was approaching. Just one person, 3 kilometers out. Zhang Longhu almost laughed. One person? He thought the Tianjun group's young master had sent a messenger to beg for mercy. That one person was me. I walked toward the compound at a steady pace. Gun barrels pointed at me from every direction. I wasn't afraid. My cultivation had reached the peak of the Kaiyuan realm. My protective energy could deflect bullets easily. A guard on the wall shouted at me to leave. I flicked a silver needle through the air. It pierced his skull before he could blink. The other gunners opened fire. A storm of bullets rained down on me. I summoned my internal energy and formed an invisible barrier around my body. Every bullet bounced away harmlessly. In the blink of an eye, I was at the front gate. Zhang Longhu heard the gunfire and cursed. A panicked guard fell off the wall and stammered that someone had broken through. I blasted through their half-meter-thick wooden gate with a single strike, shattering it into splinters. I walked into the main hall carrying 3 years of hatred and locked eyes with Zhang Longhu. Zhang Longhu, 3 days are up. I'm here to take your life. Zhang Taigang saw my face and went blank with terror. His legs shook uncontrollably. He screamed to his father that it was me, the one who had crippled him. But with his father and 20 martial artists surrounding him, he found a sliver of courage. He snarled that he would make me suffer 100 times over. Zhang Longhu studied me carefully. He was shocked that I had walked through a wall of gunfire alone. But he still saw only one person. He smiled coldly and asked who gave me the courage to speak to him this way. He said if it weren't for the Tianjun group's threat, he would have killed me already. I kept walking toward him, my face perfectly calm. I am the Tianjun group's young master. The whole hall went dead silent. Then they burst out laughing. Zhang Longhu's brother Zhang Longting mocked me, saying I might as well claim to be the Jade Emperor. Zhang Taigang looked at me like I was mentally ill. Zhang Longhu offered me a deal. Kneel, knock my head on the ground 100 times, and he would spare my life. He would even give me a position in his organization. He could tell I was no ordinary fighter. His 20 martial artists surrounded me. Snipers locked onto me from above. He thought even if I had 3 heads and 6 arms, I was trapped. Then I told him the real reason I was here. 3 years ago, you slaughtered my entire family. Today, I will use your blood to honor every one of the 100 lives you took. Zhang Longhu froze. His eyes went wide with a fear I had never seen before. He stumbled backward. "You're the Yi family kid? You're still alive?" He studied my face and saw the resemblance to my father. The entire Zhang family started trembling. They knew one person had escaped the massacre. They never expected me to come back, and certainly not like this. Zhang Longhu recovered and ordered his gunmen to fire. Dozens of bullets screamed toward me. I raised one hand. Every single bullet stopped in midair, suspended like frozen raindrops. Then they clinked to the ground. The room went absolutely silent. Every face was white with disbelief. They had never seen anything like this. It was beyond everything they understood about the world. Before Zhang Longhu could speak, I charged. He screamed for his 20 martial artists to stop me. They attacked together, 20 streams of devastating internal energy crashing toward me like volcanic eruptions. Enough to turn any normal person to dust. I threw both fists forward. The collision sent all 20 of them flying backward, vomiting blood. One blow. All 20 down. Zhang Taigang looked like his soul had left his body. Zhang Longhu stared at me in horror. I beckoned to him casually. I told him I had heard he was also a martial artist. I would give him 3 free strikes. That pushed him over the edge. He screamed and charged at me with everything he had. Full body tempering peak power. His attacks were fierce, but he couldn't touch me. I didn't even lift a finger. I just dodged, letting him exhaust himself. 3 strikes passed. I told him his turn was over. My expression turned cold. I grabbed both of his arms and ripped them off his body. The entire Zhang family watched in horror. The remaining martial artists turned white as ghosts. In one move, I had destroyed the strongest fighter they had ever known. I was about to drag Zhang Longhu up for questioning when an old man stepped forward. He said his name was Li Song, head of the Li family. He claimed to be there on behalf of someone called Commander Wang Wu, the Black Dragon chief instructor, who served under the Prince of Jintian. He asked me to spare Zhang Longhu as a favor to the prince. I laughed coldly. The Prince of Jintian meant nothing to me. Even if he came in person, I would kill whoever I pleased. Zhang Longhu had massacred my family. There was no power in this world that could save him. I told the old man to get out of my way or die with him. Everyone in the hall gasped. They thought I was insane for disrespecting the Prince of Jinan. The prince controlled all of Southern River Province, commanded tens of thousands of soldiers, and his Black Dragon Guard alone numbered 10,000 elite warriors. Li Song had come on orders from the Black Dragon chief instructor, Wang Wu, to visit Zhang Longhu, and I had just told him to get lost. Li Song sneered and said the prince was the sky above Southern River, and that killing Zhang Longhu required the prince's permission. I slapped him. His body flew across the hall like a dead dog, blood spraying from his mouth. He crashed at Zhang Tiegong's feet and stopped moving. Li Song, the patriarch of the Li family, an elder everyone feared, dead from one slap. Zhang Taigang went numb. I didn't care who these people were. Then a booming voice came from outside. A man in heavy armor stormed through the gate, reeking of alcohol. He was Wang Wu, the Black Dragon chief instructor himself, commander of 10,000 soldiers under the Prince of Jinan. He ordered me to get out immediately and threatened to end the Yi bloodline forever. Zhang Longhu grabbed onto this lifeline. He begged Wang Wu to save him. Wang Wu called in his troops. 100 Black Dragon guards poured through the gate in full armor, wielding steel blades. The pressure they gave off was suffocating. Even the martial artists in the room were impressed. Every one of these soldiers was a trained warrior. The first few charged at me. That was their mistake. I gathered my energy and unleashed 2 palm strikes. The shockwaves hit like tsunamis. Dozens of guards flew backward. Then I shot into the remaining crowd like lightning. Within moments, all 100 lay scattered on the ground. I walked up to Wang Wu. He stood there completely stunned. Even he couldn't have lasted 30 moves against 100 of his own Black Dragon guards, and I had destroyed them all in seconds. Zhang Taigang finally stammered out what he should have said from the start, that I had caught bullets with my bare hands and defeated 20 martial artists with a single blow. Wang Wu's eyes went wide. Before he could speak, I slapped him across the room. Chief instructor, nothing special, I said. He was stronger than Zhang Longhu, but still stuck at the body tempering level. I was at the peak of Kaiyuan. The gap between us was a canyon. Wang Wu scrambled to his feet, furious, and threatened to call more men. I grabbed his throat and snapped his neck. He died with his eyes still staring at me in disbelief. He never imagined someone would actually dare kill him. Zhang Taigang collapsed to his knees, smashing his forehead against the floor, begging me to spare his life. I grabbed Zhang Longhu by the throat and lifted him off the ground. His arms were already gone. He was barely alive. "Tell me everything," I said. "Was it you who destroyed my family? Tell me every detail, or I will wipe out every living thing in the Zhang household." The suffocating grip on his throat shattered his last bit of resistance. He finally believed what I had told him at the beginning, that I was the young master of the Tianjun group, and he knew I had the power to do exactly what I promised. "I'll talk," he gasped. "I'll tell you everything. If I tell you everything, will you spare my wife and children?" Zhang Longhu begged, trembling. I looked down at him. "You think you're in a position to negotiate?" I kicked both his knees. The bones shattered. Now all 4 of his limbs were destroyed. The Zhang family compound was filled with wailing. Armed guards dropped their weapons the moment they saw me. Some were so terrified by my gaze that they fell off rooftops. The 100 Black Dragon guards roared with fury when they saw their chief instructor dead. Their voices shook the hall like thunder. I told them to leave or die. Not a single one moved forward. I shouted once more, lacing my voice with internal energy. The shockwave hit them so hard they coughed blood and collapsed. Within moments, all 100 of them scrambled away like stray dogs. I stood over Zhang Longhu and demanded answers. He finally confessed. Yes, he had led the attack on my family, but he said he was only following orders. The true mastermind was the Azure Dragon War God, ranked 8th on the nation's war god list. And there were 2 ancient martial arts grandmasters involved, far more powerful than Zhang Longhu himself. He said those 2 were from Southern River Province and could kill him as easily as killing a chicken. They had long since left Dragon City. So the truth was worse than I imagined. My family hadn't just been destroyed by an underground thug. It went all the way up to a legendary war god and hidden grandmasters. I crushed Zhang Longhu's skull with a single palm strike. The underground emperor of Dragon City was dead. Zhang Taigang screamed and charged at me in blind rage. I punched him once in the chest. He flew across the room and died on impact. Every remaining person in the compound, hundreds of guards, servants, family members, martial artists, dropped to their knees, crying and begging for their lives. I told them I would spare anyone who hadn't been part of my family's massacre. The others would not survive. The martial artists on the ground began pointing out the guilty ones. Within minutes, dozens more were identified. I executed every single one of them as offerings to my parents and my little sister. When it was over, the Zhang family compound was soaked in blood. The underground empire that had terrorized Dragon City for years was gone. I walked out alone, covered in blood. I changed my clothes and left without looking back. At the Tianjun Group headquarters, I stood by the top-floor window, staring out at the city. Zhao Fu rushed in. He had already heard about the Zhang family's destruction. I told him to investigate the Southern River Grandmasters and the connections behind the Azure Dragon War God. He came back within minutes with names. There were 4 Grandmasters in Southern River Province. 2 of them, Zhang Yongshan and Zhao Wuji, had visited Dragon City years ago and then mysteriously disappeared. They were the ones who helped destroy my family. I carved their names into my memory. The news of the Zhang family's fall spread across Dragon City like wildfire. Every powerful family was shaken. At the Li family mansion, Li Zihong, the man who had profited from my family's destruction, dropped his teacup when he heard. His own father, Li Song, was among the dead. A servant confirmed that I had stormed the Zhang compound alone and killed everyone who stood in my way, including the Black Dragon chief instructor. Li Zihong collapsed into his chair, face white with terror. He whispered what everyone in Dragon City was now realizing. Yifeng has come back for revenge. The news from the Li family's spy at the Zhang compound was confirmed. Li Zihong's son, Li Xiaodian, asked who I was. Li Zihong told him, I was the last survivor of the Yi family, the one who slipped through the cracks 3 years ago. Now I was back, and I had killed Zhang Longhu and his son. Li Xiaodian was shocked. He had never known that his family's wealth came from looting my family's assets after the massacre. Li Zihong immediately called the heads of the other 2 families who had profited from my family's downfall, the Lin family and the Lu family. Within the hour, Lin Jun and old patriarch Lu Qishan arrived at the Li mansion. Li Zihong was grief-stricken. His father Li Song was among the dead at the Zhang compound. He offered to give up half of the Li family's fortune if it would calm my anger and buy peace. Lin Jun refused outright. He had a deep scar on his face, a souvenir from the night my family was destroyed. He argued that surrendering wealth wouldn't save them. If I was willing to kill Zhang Longhu and even the Black Dragon chief instructor, I would kill them too regardless of what they offered. He wanted to fight. They debated whether I was truly a grandmaster. Lin Jun couldn't believe a 24-year-old could reach that level. He pointed out that even the Azuro war god, ranked first among the nation's 8 war gods and considered the greatest martial talent in the country, had only been a low-level body-tempering warrior at my age. Lin Jun insisted I must have had help. Old Lu Qishan silenced them both. He ordered his people to investigate my background thoroughly. Then he announced he would personally visit the Prince of Jinan to request his intervention. Lu Qishan was the strongest among them. Decades of training had brought him to the peak of body tempering, one step below Grandmaster level. He believed the Prince of Jinan and the 2 Southern River Grandmasters would be enough to deal with me. Lin Jun was excited. He wanted me dead, roots and all, so I could never threaten them again. After leaving the Tianjun Group headquarters, I went straight home. My godparents were terrified. Mu Qing had told them about the assassins who attacked us the night before, and they had been worried sick all day. When I walked through the door, my godmother rushed over and grabbed my arms, checking me for injuries. I told her I was fine. Then I said something that made everyone freeze. From now on, there is no more Zhang family in Dragon City. Mu Qing and my godfather stared at me with wide eyes. I had taken down the first of my enemies, but I knew more danger was coming. The remaining families, the Grandmasters, the Azure Dragon War God. The road ahead would be bloody. I didn't want my godmother's family caught in the crossfire. This visit was to say goodbye. I knelt before my godmother and told her everything. I told her how I watched my family die, how my little sister was killed in my mother's arms, how I ran for 3 days and nights, badly wounded, until I ended up in prison, how Zhang Longhu's hands were stained with my parents' blood, and how today I had finally avenged them. My godfather stood frozen, trembling. He understood the danger. He knew who Zhang Longhu was and what kind of powerful people stood behind him. Years ago, he had even fought with my godmother over her decision to build a memorial for my parents, afraid it would bring disaster to the Sun family. Now I was telling them I had wiped out the Zhang family entirely. My godfather couldn't take it. He told me to go visit my parents' graves alone. He didn't want my godmother involved. I placed some money on the table and told them this was my farewell. I didn't want to drag their family into my war. I thanked my godmother for everything, especially for giving my parents and sister a proper resting place. I turned to leave. My godmother exploded at my godfather. She screamed that even if it meant the end of her marriage, she was going with me. She said I was her son, and my business was her business. Then she grabbed her keys and drove me to the cemetery herself. At the graves, I knelt in the dirt and wept. I told my parents I had begun taking revenge. I told my little sister I brought her favorite fruit. I placed the offerings carefully and knocked my head against the stone 3 times. For the first time in 3 years, I let myself cry. My godmother stood quietly beside me. After a few minutes, I stood up and told her I was leaving. She asked where I was going. I didn't answer. I turned and walked away without looking back. I was going after the 2 grandmasters. Meanwhile, old Lu Qishan had driven to the Prince of Jinnan's massive estate. Inside the Great Hall, the prince, Su Tsang, was already furious. His black dragon guards had reported back in shame. His chief instructor Wang Wu was dead. Lu Qishan knelt before him and begged him to destroy me, calling me a remnant of the Yi family who dared kill on the prince's territory. The prince slammed his fist down. He ordered his men to summon the 2 grandmasters, Zhao Wuji and Zhang Yongshan. These were the same 2 who had helped destroy my family 3 years ago, acting on orders from the Azure Dragon War God, passed down through the prince himself. Now the prince wanted them to finish what they started. Lu Qishan smiled. With 2 grandmasters coming, he was certain I was finished. But I wasn't waiting for them to come to me. I was already driving to Sea City. Today was Zhao Wuji's 50th birthday and his wedding day. 5 years ago, he had reached the Kaiyuan realm and become a grandmaster. He had sworn never to marry until he achieved that title. Now the Zhao family estate was packed with guests and gifts from every powerful family in Sea City. I parked my black Mercedes right in front of his gate. Hundreds of guests turned to stare at me. I stepped out of the car, looked up at the Zhao family sign, and let my killing intent flood the entire courtyard. Zhao Wuji, get out here and die. My voice hit like thunder. Guests stumbled backward. The crowd inside froze. Some rich young man stepped up and asked who dared make noise at a grandmaster's door. I slapped him so hard he flew through the gate and crashed inside the compound. He was dead before he hit the ground. The guests at the Zhao family compound were stunned. Someone had come to cause trouble on the grandmaster's wedding day. They laughed at first, assuming I was just another fool looking to challenge Zhao Wuji and die for the honor. Then Zhao Wuji himself stepped out from the main hall. His body radiated a suffocating pressure, the protective energy of a Kaiyuan realm grandmaster. He told me to come back tomorrow since it was his wedding day. I told him if he didn't come out, I would slaughter every person in his household. He laughed and said he had no children, no parents, just himself. He invited me to try. His dozen or so disciples rushed at me, eager to impress their master. I flicked my wrist and sent a handful of steel needles flying. They dropped like cut wheat, blood pooling beneath them. The crowd went silent. I shouted for everyone who wanted to live to get out. Dozens of people fled. I walked through the gate into the decorated courtyard, red banners and silk mint for celebration. But to my eyes, they looked soaked in blood. More fighters charged at me. They all fell. By the time I stood 10 meters from Zhao Wuji, the ground behind me was covered with bodies. Now he finally realized something was wrong. He asked who I was. Yi Feng. From the Yi family of Dragon City. His pupils shrank. He stumbled backward. Impossible. The Yi family is dead. I told him I was the one they failed to kill. I asked him directly. Was he one of the people who murdered my parents? His reaction confirmed everything. He had been living comfortably for years with my family's blood on his hands. Before I could move, a young man in robes leaped out with a sword. Zhao Yuanshuang, Zhao Wuji's nephew, considered the greatest young talent in Sea City. He had recently learned to channel sword energy. He ordered me to kneel and cut off my own hands. I didn't even look at him. He wasn't worth my attention. Enraged, he thrust his sword at me. Zhao Wuji screamed for him to stop, but it was too late. I caught the blade between 2 fingers and snapped it. Then I flicked the broken piece through the air. It sliced across Zhao Yuanshuang's throat. Blood erupted like a fountain, splattering all over Zhao Wuji. Sea City's greatest young prodigy, dead in one move. Zhao Wuji screamed that he would kill me. He lost all composure. Someone in the crowd whispered in terror, "He's also a grandmaster." I threw one punch. Zhao Wuji's body exploded like a burst balloon. Flesh and blood rained down across the courtyard. The screams were deafening. I walked out of the Zhao compound without anyone daring to block my path or say a word. From that day forward, Sea City no longer had a grandmaster named Zhao Wuji. Meanwhile, Lu Qishan had just left the Prince of Jinnan's estate, feeling confident that 2 grandmasters would soon be hunting me down. But moments later, the prince received a phone call. "What did you say?" "Zhao Wuji is dead." The prince's face went white with shock. The Prince of Jinnan couldn't believe what he was hearing. Zhao Wuji, a grandmaster, one of his most valued allies, was dead, killed barely an hour after the prince had sent someone to summon him. When his men confirmed the killer was me, the prince stood frozen in shock. Then his fury exploded. He ordered all 3 of his top commanders assembled immediately. He declared me a threat that had to be eliminated at all costs. At the Northern Hong Gate headquarters, Grandmaster Zhang Yongshan received the news and shot out of his chair. Zhao Wuji had been his closest ally. The 4 grandmasters of Southern River Province had existed in a delicate balance, 2 against 2. Now with Zhao Wuji dead, Zhang Yongshan stood alone against the other 2 grandmasters who hated him. His entire power structure was crumbling. He handed everything over to his top disciple and raced to the Prince of Jinnan's estate. After leaving Sea City, I called Zhao Fu. I told him Zhao Wuji was dead and explained what I had learned. Both Zhao Wuji and Zhang Yongshan had carried out the massacre under orders from higher up. Zhao Fu briefed me on the Northern Hong Gate. It was a massive old organization with fighters spread across the entire province, deeply connected to the Prince of Jinnan. I told him I wasn't afraid. I had killed the prince's chief instructor without hesitation. If the prince or Zhang Yongshan wanted to find me, they were welcome to come to Dragon City. I would be waiting. Back at the Sun household, things were moving in a direction I didn't like. Yin Tianqi had heard that the Zhang family was destroyed and called Mu Qing, celebrating that he was safe now. Mu Qing didn't know how to respond. She knew from my own words that I was the one who destroyed the Zhang family. Then my godfather overheard Yin Tianqi's voice on the phone and immediately invited him over for dinner. He was thrilled. With me gone, he saw the perfect chance to push Mu Qing toward Yin Tianqi. He praised the Yin family's status and told Mu Qing he was finding her a good match. Mu Qing's face went red with anger. She insisted she had no feelings for Yin Tianqi, only gratitude for supposedly saving her. She told her father to call her mother instead, since my godmother had been gone since noon. My godfather blamed me for the fight with his wife. He warned Mu Qing to stay away from Yi family business, saying the trouble I had stirred up would eventually come back to haunt everyone around me. He was more convinced than ever that keeping me in the Sun family would bring disaster. Yin Tianqi put on his best suit, grabbed expensive wine and tea, and drove over to the Sun house with a huge grin on his face. Meanwhile, Mu Qing sat quietly, feeling something she hadn't expected, a strange sense of loss now that I was gone. Yin Tianqi pulled up to the Sun house in his luxury car. My godfather spotted him through the window and rushed out to greet him like a long-lost son, grabbing the expensive gifts from his hands. He made Mu Qing come out to welcome Yin Tianqi. She smiled politely, but clearly didn't want him there. My godfather didn't care. He was practically pushing them together, bragging about Mu Qing's cooking and telling them to spend more time together. He kept comparing Yin Tianqi's expensive tea to the cheap stuff I had brought. In his eyes, a wealthy family heir was exactly what his daughter needed, and I was nothing but trouble. The three of them ate and drank until late at night. Yin Tianqi left whistling, pleased with himself. But as he stepped out the gate, he ran into me. His face lit up with cruel satisfaction. He was drunk and couldn't resist bragging. He told me my godfather had promised Mu Qing to him, that I wasn't fit to shine the Yin family's shoes, and that Mu Qing would be his. He didn't notice my godmother standing right behind me. She stepped forward and slapped him across the face without a word. She told him that as long as she was alive, he would never set foot in her house again, and she would never let her daughter marry someone like him. She screamed at him to get out. Yin Tianqi sobered up instantly. He saw her face, then saw the killing intent in my eyes, and ran away with his tail between his legs. After he left, I told my godmother the truth. I suspected Yin Tianqi was the one who had drugged Mu Qing's drink at the reunion. I was worried that both Mu Qing and my godfather were being deceived by him. My godmother's expression turned dark and cold. She swore that if my godfather dared give Mu Qing to that monster, she would end the marriage. She begged me to stay and not leave. She was worried about me after everything that had happened. I told her not to worry. I would be staying in Dragon City, and the Yi family still had its place here. I asked her to call me if anything happened, then left. That night at the Yin mansion, Yin Tianqi smashed his coffee table in rage, swearing he would make me pay and that Mu Qing would be his. Then a skeletal hand reached out of the darkness and grabbed his throat. A figure in a black robe, face like a skull, radiating death, stared at him from the shadows. Yin Tianqi screamed that he was seeing a ghost. The figure told him to shut up or be turned into a puddle of blood. The skull-faced man said he could help Yin Tianqi kill me and take Mu Qing. He pulled out a blood-soaked talisman and told Yin Tianqi to place it on Mu Qing's body. Whatever he desired would come true. Yin Tianqi asked why he should trust a stranger. The figure replied simply, "Do it or die." Yin Tianqi swallowed hard and agreed. The next morning, I stood before the ruins of my family's old estate, the place where I had grown up, now nothing but rubble and weeds. But today that would change. Dozens of luxury cars lined up outside. Zhao Fu arrived with his people, awaiting my orders. I turned around, my eyes burning with resolve. I told them to announce it to the world. Starting today, the Yi family of Dragon City was back. We would take over every piece of the Zhang family's empire. The Yi family had returned. The news spread like wildfire. Every media outlet reported it. The Yi family was returning to Dragon City, and I was taking over all of Zhang Longhu's assets. The entire city shook. At the Zhang family's secondary estate, Zhang Tao slammed his fist on the table in fury. His grandfather, Zhang Xiong, the Zhang clan elder, was livid too. Li Yaqing sneered and called me a fool for jumping out and painting a target on my back. Zhang Tao told his grandfather that I had been behind the Chun family cutting ties with them. and that I had stolen the land deal they had been promised. The Zhang elder smashed his teacup and swore to make me disappear from Dragon City. Many other families felt the same. Nobody wanted a newcomer showing up to carve out a piece of their pie. Just as they were plotting against me, a messenger arrived with a red invitation card. I had sent invitations to every major family in Dragon City, inviting them to a banquet at the old Yi family estate. The Zhang elder took the card and smiled coldly. He would come to put me in my place. At the Chun mansion, Chun and Chen Zifeng stared at their golden invitation with barely contained excitement. Chun told his son to gather the family and prepare the finest gifts. He said fate had given them a golden opportunity. Chen Zifeng scrambled out the door to notify everyone. He was finally starting to understand why his father had beaten him that night at the hotel. Without that beating, the Chen family would have been destroyed. At the Sun household, things were more complicated. My godmother received the invitation and immediately started getting ready. My godfather refused to go, calling me reckless and saying I was looking for death. My godmother was furious with him. She reminded him that the Yi family had once helped the Sun family rise, and that he was being ungrateful. They argued bitterly. Then Yin Tianqi showed up in his sports car. My godmother pulled Mu Qing away from him immediately. But my godfather welcomed him warmly and even pushed him to follow Mu Qing. My godmother warned Yin Tianqi to stay away from her daughter. Mu Qing, caught between her parents, awkwardly defended Yin Tianqi, saying he was a good person. While Mu Qing was distracted speaking up for him, Yin Tianqi seized the moment. He slipped the blood-soaked talisman the skull-faced man had given him into Mu Qing's bag. Nobody noticed. My godmother dragged Mu Qing to the car and drove toward the Yi estate. Yin Tianqi followed in his own car. At my family's old compound, the place had been cleaned up by dozens of workers. 3 years ago, this had been a massacre site. Nobody had bought it because they said it was haunted by ghosts. Now it was mine again. The first to arrive was the Chen family. A fleet of Rolls-Royces pulled up. Chunin practically ran toward me, beaming like he was meeting his own father. He congratulated me on restoring the Yi family and presented his gifts with both hands. The ceremony was about to begin. Chunin arrived first with a grand gesture. 2 men carried an enormous box covered in red cloth. When he pulled the cover off, everyone gasped. It was a jade thousand-hand Guanyin statue, glowing emerald green in the sunlight. It had once stood in my family's ancestral hall. My mother had loved it more than anything. Chunin told me he had tracked it down and bought it back from a collector for 80 million yuan. He was returning it to its rightful owner, me. When I saw it, my eyes burned with tears. This was the last piece of my mother's memory. I told Chunin I would never forget this kindness. He beamed like a child who had just received the greatest reward of his life. Then more cars arrived, one fleet after another. The whole city was coming. The Zhang clan elder, Zhang Xiong, showed up with Zhang Tao, Li Yaqing, and a large entourage. One of his bodyguards barked at me to come greet the elder properly. Chunin charged over before I could react and slapped the bodyguard across the face. He told the Zhang family they were nothing and had no right to speak to me that way. Zhang Xiong was furious, but Chunin didn't flinch. When the elder threatened that Lu Qishan was coming and would settle things, Chunin simply said they would see about that. My butler had been given clear instructions. I had created 3 tiers of invitations: ordinary, gold, and purple gold. Families who had wronged me or shown disrespect received ordinary invitations and were seated in a dark corner. The Zhang family was livid when they were led to a cramped spot, while Chunin sat in the main hall. More guests arrived. Even the Lu, Li, and Lin families came, though reluctantly. They were terrified I might come after them if they refused. Only a handful of families received purple gold invitations. The banquet began. I stood before the crowd and made my announcement. The Yi family was taking over all of the Zhang family's assets, and everything that had been stolen from my family 3 years ago would be returned. Lu Qishan, Li Zihong, and Lin Zhen all flinched. They knew what I was capable of. They stayed silent. But Zhang Tao couldn't keep his mouth shut. He jumped up and pointed at my face, saying I had no right to claim Zhang family assets. Zhang Xiang sneered and called the Yi family a joke. Then he crossed the line. He insulted my dead parents, saying even if they were alive, they wouldn't have the right to say what I was saying. Others joined in, laughing and mocking me. I looked at Zhang Xiang with ice in my eyes. I told him I wasn't asking permission, I was informing him. And anyone who insulted my family and my parents deserved death. I leaped into the air and brought my palm down on the elder's skull. The force was devastating. Zhang Shiheng's body crumpled, blood pouring from every opening in his face. His eyes were frozen wide, still staring at me as he died. The entire Zhang family went white with terror. Some of them lost control of their bodies entirely. Nobody was laughing anymore. Zhang Tao screamed that I had killed his grandfather. I told him coldly, anyone who insults my family and my dead parents deserves what they get. The Zhang family had brought dozens of people. They were furious, but none of them dared make a move. Zhang Tao pointed at my face and declared a blood feud between our families. His father Zhang Jinyu had jumped in too, trying to rally the other families against me. Look at what this monster does. He kills whoever he wants. Are you all going to let him bully you? Is there nobody in Dragon City brave enough to stand up? It worked. Several families started murmuring, whispering among themselves, glaring at me. Some called for the police. Others called me a mongrel who thought everyone was afraid of him. Shannon stepped forward with a cold laugh. He reminded them all that 3 years ago, when my family was massacred in a single night, not one of them had lifted a finger. Nobody had called for justice then. Now they wanted to play heroes? He called them hypocrites to their faces. He was right. Half these people had been circling my family's corpse like vultures, hoping to grab a piece. Zhang Longhu just got there first. Zhang Jinyue turned to Lu Qishan for support, begging the old patriarch to stand against me. Lu Qishan's eye twitched. He wasn't about to paint a target on himself for the Zhang family's sake. He smiled at me and said he fully supported my takeover of Zhang Longhu's assets. He even added that Zhang Longhu deserved what he got. Lin Zhun and Li Zihong immediately followed his lead, nodding eagerly and agreeing. I almost laughed. These 3 cowards, they knew what I could do, so they smiled to my face while plotting behind my back. Then my godmother and Mu Qing arrived. The ice on my face melted the moment I saw them. I rushed forward and welcomed them into the main hall. Shortly after, my godfather and Yin Tianqi followed. My godfather refused to sit in the honored section despite having a purple gold invitation. He parked himself in a corner with Yin Tianqi, determined to show he wasn't on my side. Lu Qishan slithered over to my godfather, flattering him about raising such a fine son. I could see through him completely. He was playing nice only because I was watching. Once the prince of Jinnan's people arrived, he wouldn't spare the Sun family a second glance. Then I addressed the room again. I said there was one more piece of business, settling old debts. I looked directly at Lu Qishan, Lin Zhun, and Li Zihong. 3 years ago, after my family was destroyed, the 3 of you joined Zhang Longhu in dividing up everything my family owned. Today, you will return it, with interest. 20 billion yuan each. The room went dead silent. Then a collective gasp. 20 billion was an astronomical sum. Even Lu Qishan, the wealthiest of the 3, couldn't produce that much cash at once. Lin Zhun and Li Zihong would have to sell everything they owned and still come up short. Lin Zhun snapped immediately. Impossible. He had been swallowing his rage all evening and couldn't hold it any longer. Lu Qishan clenched his jaw. He had expected me to demand a few billion at most, not a number that would gut all 3 families entirely. Lin Zhun shouted that 20 billion was robbery. He argued that Zhang Longhu had taken most of my family's wealth, and all they got were scraps. He demanded to know how I could ask for so much. Lu Qishan and Li Zihong stayed quiet, watching my face carefully. The Zhang family tried to stir up the crowd. They called me a thief and told everyone to unite against me. Other families joined in. Some said Zhang Longhu owed them money too. Others said I had no right to claim his assets. The room erupted into angry shouting. In the corner, Yin Tianqi was grinning. He had come specifically to watch me fail. I ignored the noise and looked at the 3 men who had stolen from my family. Pay up, then get out. Lin Zhun yelled that I was going too far. Lu Qishan grabbed his arm to calm him down. Then the old fox turned to me and agreed, but said he needed time to sell assets and gather the money. I gave them 3 days. After that, I would come collect in person, and if I had to come to them, it would cost far more than 20 billion. Lu Qishan left immediately. Lin Zhun and Li Zihong followed, seething with hatred. As soon as they were out of sight, I knew Lu Qishan's eyes had turned cold with scheming. The Zhang clan left too, threatening revenge. Li Yaqing stared at me one last time, full of regret and bitterness, then sneered to herself that I would be finished soon. Most families cleared out. Only a few remained: the Chen family, the Su family, and the Sun family. Qian pulled Mu Qing aside and complained that I was too arrogant, saying raw courage alone wouldn't be enough to stand against every powerful family in the city. My godfather sat in a corner drinking with Yin Tianqi, completely ignoring me. But my godmother came to me with tears of pride. She congratulated me on becoming a family head and pressed a golden protective charm into my hand, one she had prayed for at a temple. I felt warmth flood through me. I thanked her and kept it close. Then a booming voice echoed from the gate. Tianjun Group Chairman Zhao Fu sends his congratulations. Zhao Fu marched in with dozens of men. Everyone left in the room was stunned. Yin Tianqi's eyes nearly popped. Mu Qing stared in shock. Even my godfather suddenly sat up straight. Now he understood why the Chun family treated me the way they did. If the Tianjun Group was backing me, everything made sense. Zhao Fu's timing was deliberate. His arrival was a message to everyone still here. Choose the right side, or face the Tianjun Group's wrath. My godmother looked at Zhao Fu, then back at me with questions in her eyes. I told her Zhao Fu's family and I had a connection, and that she could go to him if she ever needed help. The banquet continued, and the mood finally turned festive. But Yin Tianqi was distracted. The blood talisman the skull-faced man had given him was already inside Mu Qing's bag. Red mist seeped out invisibly, entering her body through her eyes, nose, and mouth. Her pupils took on a faint red tint. Her lips turned an unnaturally vivid shade of red. Nobody noticed, except Yin Tianqi, who watched with dark satisfaction. Miles away, in a hidden estate, a gray-robed old man who looked like a living skeleton suddenly opened his eyes. "The soul-controlling curse is complete," he whispered with a sinister laugh. He sat cross-legged, weaving strange hand signs and chanting. Then he shot to his feet, trembling with excitement. He had sensed something extraordinary in Mu Qing's soul. A 5-yin mystic body, he gasped, stumbling backward in shock. Behind him, a beautiful woman in the shadows asked what he meant. The old man's eyes burned with greed. The banquet wound down late into the night. Chunin and his family said goodbye and left. Zhao Fu departed after greeting my godmother. Eventually, only the Sun family and Yin Tianqi remained. My godfather nudged Mu Qing to walk Yin Tianqi out. She nodded with empty eyes and took his hand, leading him toward the gate. Something about her felt off. Her eyes had a faint red tint, and her movements seemed mechanical. Outside the gate, Mu Qing suddenly grabbed Yin Tianqi by the throat and lifted him. He choked in terror. She threw him to the ground like garbage and told him coldly that from now on, he was her dog. Yin Tianqi nodded frantically, drenched in cold sweat. He had felt death in her grip. Whatever that skull-faced man had done to her, it had turned her into something terrifying. Miles away, the gray-robed sorcerer was controlling Mu Qing like a puppet. He and his female companion were ecstatic. They had discovered that Mu Qing possessed the 5-yin mystic body, an incredibly rare constitution. The sorcerer wanted to sacrifice her body in an alchemical furnace to create a divine pill that would restore his own ruined form and make him more powerful than even his sect's Grand Master. He was furious that Yin Tianqi had tried to defile such a precious body. Mu Qing walked back inside. My godmother scolded her gently for going after Yin Tianqi instead of congratulating me. Then Mu Qing smiled and called me Brother Yifeng and reached out to shake my hand. The moment our hands touched, I felt it. A wave of dark, sinister energy coursed through her body, and she had never once called me brother before. I held her wrist and secretly checked her pulse. The evil energy was unmistakable. Soul-controlling curse. My heart sank. This was a forbidden dark art from the southern seas. Once cast, the victim's mind falls under the caster's total control, with the curse burrowing deep into the soul. Breaking it by force could damage the soul permanently and put the victim into an endless sleep. Someone had targeted Mu Qing, and they had done it right under my nose. I grabbed her arm tightly and demanded to know who was controlling her. The thing wearing Mu Qing's face smiled back at me. Far away, the sorcerer was shocked that I had seen through his spell, but he laughed, confident that nobody could break it without him. My godfather saw me gripping his daughter and exploded with rage. He screamed at me to let her go. I tried to explain. Someone had placed a curse on Mu Qing. But neither he nor my godmother understood what I was saying. I couldn't wait. If I let go, the caster would regain full control. I pulled out 3 silver needles and drove them into Mu Qing's pressure points. She collapsed unconscious in my arms. My godfather nearly lost his mind. He snatched Mu Qing from me and screamed that I was a monster. My godmother slapped him across the face and told him to calm down. She said she trusted me. They laid Mu Qing on a bed. Her breathing was stable. I had only sealed her acupoints to block the curse temporarily. But I was missing a critical medicinal ingredient needed to fully break the spell. My godfather warned me through clenched teeth that if anything happened to his daughter, he would never forgive me. I didn't blame him. I was just as worried. I called Zhao Fu immediately and ordered him to send guards to surround the estate. Within minutes, dozens of armed men had the compound locked down. Whoever had done this to Mu Qing, I would hunt them to the ends of the earth. The night passed without incident. I knew the person who cursed Mu Qing wouldn't show himself easily. He was confident I couldn't break his spell, but he was wrong. I looked at Mu Qing's sleeping face and promised her I would find a cure. Then I called Zhao Fu and asked where in Southern River Province I could find rare medicinal herbs. He told me about the Chun family in Cloud City, a legendary medical dynasty. Their patriarch was Chun Shoan, one of the 4 Southern River Grandmasters, and also the most famous healer in the province. He was the head of the Divine Physician sect. Zhao Fu said the Chun family would definitely have what I needed, but their doors were nearly impossible to enter. I drove straight to Cloud City. The Chun family operated out of a massive traditional Chinese medicine hall called Shinong Hall, named after the mythical father of medicine. Bold name. They had to be good to carry it. Inside, hundreds of patients waited. The air was thick with the scent of herbs. A young man immediately blocked my path, saying I needed an appointment. I told him I was there to see Chen Shoan. The entire room turned to stare at me, then burst out laughing. They said the Grandmaster didn't see just anyone, and that the wealthiest families in Cloud City waited months for an audience. They thought I was crazy. The commotion drew out a middle-aged man wearing glasses, Chun Huayan, Chen Shoan's son. He told me his father wasn't seeing patients and offered to help me himself. I watched him work on an old man named Huang Yan. He used silver needles with impressive skill, the pure yang needle technique. I recognized it immediately. It was an ancient method that had been mostly lost to history. Only 8 of the original 12 needle positions had survived. The Chun family had preserved those 8 as their family treasure. As it happened, I had mastered all 12. After Chun Huayan finished, the old man was about to leave. I stopped him and said that while the treatment would ease his condition, it would only extend his life, not cure him. His internal injuries were too severe for 8 needles alone. Chen Huayan was stunned that I recognized his technique by name. Before he could ask more, I flicked 3 of my own golden needles, the 9-turn divine needles my master had given me, through the air and into the old man's chest. Then I sent a wave of internal energy through his back, forcing out a mouthful of toxic black blood. The old man felt the ocean of power inside me and nearly lost his footing. He bowed deeply and thanked me, introducing himself as Huang Yan and inviting me to visit his family anytime. Chen Huayan's attitude completely changed. He led me through the main courtyard into a private room, treating me with the utmost respect. He asked what needle technique I had used. I told him the truth. It was the pure yang needle method. Specifically, the final 4 needles of the original 12 that the world thought were lost forever. His eyes went wide. He nearly dropped to his knees. The first 8 needles were the Chun family's most closely guarded secret, passed down through generations. And here I was, holding the missing 4 that completed the set. He started to kneel, but I caught him. I told him to skip the formalities. I had come for one thing, a specific medicinal ingredient to save someone's life. Chen Huayan told me he would give me whatever herb I needed. For the complete 12-needle technique, he would give anything, even half his life. I told him what I needed, a century-old earth spirit root. His face changed immediately. These roots grew only in the deepest, most remote mountains. A 50-year specimen was already considered priceless. A 100-year one was nearly mythical. But then he told me the Chun family actually had one. They had only ever found 2 in their entire history, and Chen Shoan had used one when breaking through to Grandmaster level. The last remaining specimen was locked away in the Chun family vault. He said he needed his father's permission and invited me to come to the Chun family estate. I was overjoyed. With this herb, I could break the soul-controlling curse on Mu Qing. We drove 20 minutes to a magnificent estate surrounded by mountains and water. We passed through gardens and bamboo forests before reaching the main hall. Inside, I saw two old men playing chess. One was Chen Shoan, nearly 70, but radiating vitality and power. The other was a mysterious man in black robes. They were discussing the shifting political landscape of Southern River Province, comparing it to their chessboard. The black-robed man spoke of reading the stars and seeing a rising dragon in the east, an omen that something big was coming. When Chen Shoan looked at me, I could feel his gaze trying to penetrate my cultivation. He was shocked. He couldn't read me at all. He had been a grandmaster for 30 years and could normally see through anyone at a glance. But I had mastered breath concealment techniques so thoroughly that my energy appeared completely still. I could tell instantly that he was far more powerful than Zhao Wuji had been. This was a grandmaster with 3 decades of cultivation. Chen Huayan excitedly introduced me, telling his father how I had cured old Huang Yin with just 3 needles using the pure yang technique. Chen Shoan was stunned. That was their family's most closely guarded secret. I smiled and asked him why the Chen family had forgotten their ancestors' complete technique. Didn't he know the pure yang method had 12 needle positions, not just 8? The old man nearly trembled. He confessed that the remaining 4 had been lost over 100 years ago. He had spent decades searching the entire country for them, without finding a single clue. Now here I was, a young man carrying the missing pieces. He humbly asked me to teach the Chun family the complete technique. In return, I asked for the century-old earth spirit root. He didn't hesitate for even a second. He ordered Chen Huayan to fetch it immediately. A box was brought out, and inside lay a root as thick as an arm. A genuine 100-year earth spirit, exactly what I needed. I took the box with both hands. Then I told them I would demonstrate the final 4 needles once, and only once. They needed to watch carefully. I demonstrated the complete 12-needle technique for Chen Shoan and his son. I pulled out all 12 silver needles, channeling powerful internal energy through each one while my hands moved in rapid succession. I explained that while the first 8 needles were relatively straightforward and could be learned through practice, the final 4 required tremendous internal power. The practitioner had to continuously feed energy through the needles as they entered the body. When I finished, driving all 12 needles into a wooden pillar with perfect precision and devastating force, both father and son stared at me like I was some kind of monster. Chen Shoan admitted that even with his grandmaster-level cultivation, he wasn't confident he could control 12 needles simultaneously with such accuracy. He asked if his son could become my disciple. I declined. Chen Huayan was 40 years old, and having him bow to someone my age would be awkward. I told Chen Shoan he was more than capable of teaching his son himself. The old man was disappointed but understood. The mysterious black-robed man sitting nearby complimented me, saying the future belonged to young people like me. I studied him more carefully and realized I hadn't paid enough attention to him earlier. His energy was impossible to read. He was likely another grandmaster, quietly hidden in the Chen family's shadow. I refused their tea and told them I had urgent business. I took the century-old earth spirit root and left immediately for Dragon City. Every minute counted. If the silver needles stayed in Mu Qing's pressure points too long without proper treatment, she might never wake up. When I walked into the Yi family estate, I found a crowd around Mu Qing's bed. My godparents were watching anxiously as a man in a white coat, some doctor named Qin Tong, was preparing to force my silver needles out of Mu Qing's body using his own energy. I shouted for him to stop. If he had pulled those needles out without the proper preparation, Mu Qing would have died instantly. My godfather turned on me with fury, demanding to know where I had been for an entire day and night. He said he had brought this, master, to save his daughter and told me to back off. I called the man a quack. I handed the earth spirit root to the butler with instructions to grind it into powder and brew it with specific herbs. Qin Tong was offended. He lectured me about how sealing major acupoints for too long could be fatal, and insisted Mu Qing had toxic energy that needed to be expelled immediately. He clearly thought I was an ignorant kid. I ignored him completely and checked Mu Qing's pulse myself. Her condition was stable. I had made it back just in time. I told my godmother again that Mu Qing was under a curse, a soul-controlling spell. They couldn't just bring in any random doctor. Tong scoffed. He said curses didn't exist in the modern world. Of course he would say that. The soul-controlling curse was an obscure Southern Seas dark art that almost nobody in this country had ever encountered. This man had no idea what he was looking at. Tong demanded I step aside, saying if I delayed treatment any longer, Qing might never wake up. This man had some medical knowledge, but he was a fraud. Years ago, he had killed a wealthy patient in Cloud City and ruined his reputation. He had fled to Dragon City to start over. He had detected the strange energy inside Qing's body, but he thought it was just toxic buildup. He had no idea it was the dark energy produced by the soul-controlling curse. If he had pulled out my needles, that energy would have flooded Qing's heart and destroyed her mind, or killed her outright. My godfather grabbed Tong's arm and begged him to stay, offering to double his fee to $2 million. Then he turned on me, cursing and ordering me to leave. My godmother shut him down with an icy voice. She told him to let me treat Qing. My godfather couldn't believe she was trusting me over a professional. He stormed out of the hall, leaving one final threat. If his daughter didn't recover, he would make me pay with my life. Tong sat down smugly in a chair to watch me fail. His plan was simple. Let me embarrass myself, then step in as the hero and collect even more money. I took a deep breath. About 15 minutes later, the butler brought in the medicine I had ordered, the century-old earth spirit root, ground into powder and brewed with other herbs. I propped Qing up, gently parted her lips, and slowly poured the medicine in. The effect was immediate. Color rushed back to her pale face. The earth spirit root was doing its job, protecting her soul from the curse's corruption. Tong's eyes went wide when he heard me mention the 100-year earth spirit. He was from Cloud City. He knew that only the Chun medical family possessed such a treasure. He couldn't imagine how I had gotten one. Then I gathered my internal energy and struck Qing's back with my palm. The first silver needle shot out of her chest. Tong's face drained of color. He could feel the power behind that strike. If it had hit him, he would have been finished. One by one, I removed the needles. With each one, Qing coughed up dark blood as the curse's corruption was expelled. When the last needle came out, she opened her eyes. Her gaze was clear again. The real Qing was back. Wisps of red, evil energy seeped from her body and dissolved into the air. I checked her pulse one final time. The curse was completely gone. The needles had turned black from absorbing all the dark energy. My godmother burst into tears of relief and grabbed her daughter. Qing looked around, confused but feeling warm and comfortable.